He begged his wife on his knees for a divorce, and a couple months later he bought himself a Ferrari and a penthouse by the river. This is the story of Lucas, an ordinary guy who was laughed at, beaten by his father, worked 3 jobs, and lived in a slum. But one investment, one crazy idea from his drinking father, turned his whole life upside down. The main character of the story, Lucas, kneels in tears before his wife, Bella. He begs her to agree to a divorce. Bella, sitting relaxed in her chair, smirks contentedly at his humiliation and agrees to the divorce. She pushes the man with her foot and asks what he can offer her in return for a divorce. Lucas barely holds back the tears welling up in his eyes. He bites his lips from this humiliation. His life is not going well, and the reason for this is his family, especially his hated father. The old man drinks or gambles all day long and raises his voice at his now grown-up son. After his mother's death, Lucas lived with him because he was his only family, although the man did not pay any attention to his son. Lucas is forced to take on a lot of part-time jobs in addition to his office job to avoid going broke. He also works as a waiter in a diner to support himself. One day he sees a family, a father and a young son, who come into their diner. The child is mischievous and spills water. The father turns to Lucas for a towel or napkins. Despite the fact that the child does not realize the inconvenience caused, the father does not yell at him but takes care of him. He realizes that he envies such family closeness in other people. At home, the father, drunk once again, asks to lend him 10 million won. Lucas is shocked by this request since, for him, this is a lot of money. He tries to reason with his father, but he promises to return the loan in double the amount. He talks about a new currency that is coming out that is going to change the future completely and that he wants to invest in. Lucas replies that hard-earned money is more important to him than a dubious chance to make money. The father does not want to hear any excuses. He admits that he has always been a hopeless drunk and raised his hand against his son. However, now he asks Lucas for another chance to change. The father asks for this so desperately that tears come to his eyes. Lucas is annoyed, but he cannot refuse his father and eventually agrees to his request. But he wants too much to save their family, to try to make it normal. He wants to trust his father one last time and lends him money. He actively thanks Lucas, hugs him, and promises that his son will not regret it. However, his joyful cries do not inspire Lucas with much hope for success, and for good reason, since very soon Lucas's last relative will also depart to another world. He holds his father's funeral, and thoughts about the currency he bought fade into the background. Lucas's father died in a car crash. Experts say he lost control of his car due to rain and died at the scene. Lucas feels sad about losing his last family member, but at the same time, he feels liberated. With mixed feelings, he spends his leisure time drinking, just as his father had done not long ago. Left alone, he reflects on the strangeness of his life. On the television, he watches while having dinner an interview with a young man. Despite his young age, he has already achieved great success and works in the investment sector. Lucas wonders if this big success is buying a house or something else. However, it turns out that it involves large assets amounting to 4 billion Korean won, which makes Lucas cough. The host asks the young man what he invested in, and he reveals that he chose Bitcoin, the very currency Lucas's father spoke of. Lucas puts 2 and 2 together and realizes that the man on screen got rich doing something he didn't believe in. He looks at his phone lying on the table, wanting to make sure he heard everything correctly, and loads up his online wallet. The host reflects on how profitable it would be to invest in Bitcoin at the very beginning of its journey. The interviewee is sure that no one expected such a rapid increase in price, but if someone had invested in it at the time Lucas's father did, his investment would have grown 2,500 times. Lucas has a huge sum of money in his account, and he almost loses consciousness, unable to believe what he sees. The rise in the price of Bitcoin has driven many around the world crazy, and Lucas feels like he is barely holding on. He has 25 billion won in his account, which is 2,500 times more than his initial investment. Lucas spends the entire evening in shock, constantly checking his online wallet. To clear his head, Lucas rides his bike outside despite the chilly weather. Even after some time, he still can't believe that he has more than 20 billion won in his account. At home, he can't stop checking the market price, which is changing at an incredible speed, so he decides to change the environment. The amount in his account increased by several hundred million overnight. Lucas can't decide whether he should sell his assets now because he already has a huge amount of money. He returns to his dilapidated home, torn apart by contradictions. He reflects that since he has been frugal all his life, he will be able to be patient, but curiosity is stronger than him, and Lucas decides to check his savings once again. He prays in disbelief, covered in sweat, because the amount changes, once again. During the time he went to clear his head, his assets increased by another 2 million won, meaning he now has 2 billion won. Despite his increased wealth, Lucas still goes to work in the office. The head of the department to which the hero belongs is thinking at a meeting about the company's potential clients. Company employees discuss the possible risks of collaborating with a clinic located in Busan. The department head assumes that someone from the group will need to be sent to Busan on a business trip. Apart from Lucas, no one takes the initiative in this matter. Everyone looks away. The department head tries to find out if Lucas is sure because he looks very tired, but he just spends all his time studying his assets. So Lucas says everything is fine. The head of the department decides that Lucas needs another person to help him. Then Sue, one of the most beautiful and popular girls in the company, volunteers to go with the hero to Busan. Lucas's colleagues look at her, dreaming of spending time together. Other male employees immediately start shouting that they also want to go on a business trip, but the boss decides that 2 people are enough, and Lucas and Sue will go to Busan. The heroes set off by car to their destination to resolve business issues. Sue says she enjoys driving the car her brother sold her last year. Busan is Sue's hometown, and if before she often went home, now she has a lot of work and sports on weekends, so there is no time. They chat for a while, and Lucas wonders what he should do with his life now that he has a lot of money. The journey is leisurely, and there is pleasant conversation between Lucas and Sue. When they stop to take a break from the road, Lucas buys the girl a coffee. He is surprised that his colleagues are so eager to discuss work-related issues with Sue, and she thanks Lucas for his help. Sue shifts uncomfortably and looks away, her cheeks flushing. Finally making up her mind, she approaches Lucas to see if he wants to go shopping with her that evening. Sue hasn't been shopping for a long time, and she still has something to talk about. Lucas considers her offer but decides that a distraction would be nice, so he agrees. Later, the 2 of them go shopping. The first thing they do is head to a clothing store and look at business suits. Lucas, who is no longer used to going to stores, does not understand why he cannot order the same thing online but at a better price. Sue suddenly offers Lucas help in choosing and buying a suit, and he is surprised by such an offer. The clothes are a kind of bribe because the girl has an awkward request. Lucas has enough money for shopping, so he demands that Sue stop delaying. The awkward conversation. Blushing furiously, Sue searches for words and finally asks Lucas to act as her boyfriend in front of her parents. He is stunned, but Sue explains that her younger sister already has a partner, and her parents are pushing Sue into a relationship. Blushing at such an unexpected request, Lucas tries to comprehend it, but he still agrees to help his colleague. In Seoul, the evening, they go to a restaurant. Sue's parents are very happy to meet their daughter's chosen one. They are polite to Lucas, make jokes, and try to please him. They wonder if the heroes work for the same company, and Lucas confirms this. Sue's mother is curious about how they became friends, and Lucas then explains that they bonded when he taught the girl the basics of their job. The parents are satisfied with this answer, and they continue their peaceful meal. Lucas, however, recalls a completely different emotional dinner with his ex-wife's relatives. They were negative and aggressive towards him, raising their voices. They also asked a lot of questions about the hero's parents who had already died by that time. By bombarding him with questions about money and real estate, they pressured Lucas that after the wedding, he would be obliged to help them with money. Lucas felt a terrible pressure and contempt towards him from them. Nobody cared about Lucas's own opinion, and he failed to impress his ex-wife's relatives. Sue's parents welcomed him warmly and kindly and made him feel at peace. The girl's mother asks if Lucas liked the food, and he enthusiastically praises it. The experience he shares during his fake date with Sue is completely different from what he had already experienced in his previous marriage. After the date, they said a warm goodbye to Sue's parents, who were pleased with the meeting. The girl's mother suddenly hints to her that she doesn't have to return home to spend the night. Lucas reflects that it was only the money that kept him from feeling awkward that evening, as his ex-wife had trampled his confidence. Mama Sue, laughing at the girl and her chosen one, asks them to give birth to a granddaughter for them first. Lucas sweats in embarrassment at the warm welcome. He hears Sue's parents reasoning that he is quite good for their daughter. After meeting the parents, Lucas and Sue go for a walk along the beach. Sue sheepishly bows before Lucas and begs for forgiveness. She feels very awkward about this evening, but Lucas immediately tries to calm her down. The girl replies that She saw his tense expression on his face due to bad memories from her parents' questions. Lucas realizes that Sue knows about his previous marriage and rushes to reassure her. His parents were kind to him, and the food was delicious, so he wasn't offended. But since the girl still regrets it, he suggests that she smooth things over with a walk to interesting places. Sue immediately begins to think about how to plan the best route. She is so immersed in her thoughts that she walks ahead of Lucas, and he calls her to slow down. However, he understands that Sue is simply very interested in the task she has received, and exhales with a laugh. Sue's mother's words about her being very stubborn are proven true. Suddenly, Sue's eyes turn to something on the beach, and she has an idea. She shows Lucas the place where she wants to take him. Looking at the place, Lucas feels awkward and chuckles nervously. Sue's interest turns to the fortune teller's tent located nearby on the beach. When the heroes decide to do some fortune telling, Sue gets a good result because she has good and pure energy. The fortune teller describes the girl from a positive side, both as a colleague and as a person. Sue is very happy that luck will be on her side throughout her life. However, the fortune teller points out that Sue recently missed a chance for something. The fortune teller says that she needs to be bolder and not hesitate. Lucas listens to their conversation with half an ear. He absolutely does not believe in these fortunes. The fortune teller says that Sue will still have another chance, and she must be strong and attentive. Lucas can barely contain his sigh at the fortune teller's words. However, Sue persuades the man to take part in the fortune telling. The girl thinks the fortune teller is trustworthy, but Lucas has no questions he would like to ask her. He tries to refocus his attention on Sue's interests, but the fortune teller's keen gaze is already fixed on him. The first thing the stranger tells about him concerns the times of famine that Lucas lived through, and this shocks him. He is stunned that the fortune teller knows about the poverty he lived in as a youth. However, Lucas, according to the fortune teller, was able to catch great luck, and she even envies him. The fortune teller advises Lucas to travel around the world and experience many things because this will allow him to further increase his luck. She assures him that Lucas can live the way he wants without looking back at the past, and he will succeed. Sue casually tries to find out how lucky Lucas is in his personal life. Lucas immediately becomes immersed in thoughts about the fortune teller's words and has no idea how he can change his lifestyle. However, he still found it pleasant to hear good predictions. When it comes time to pay for the fortune telling, Lucas is horrified by the large sum, although he has hundreds of times more in his account. Nevertheless, they leave the fortune teller in an elevated mood. Sue invites Lucas to eat conger eel with her at the market. She takes the still thoughtful man by the jacket and leads him behind her. Lucas doesn't know what to expect from the future yet, but he is starting to feel interested in it. In total, the heroes need 4 days to set up work in Busan, after which they return from their business trip. Lucas returns from a business trip to his abandoned apartment. He immediately rushes to the computer to check the Bitcoin rate. At first, he is horrified that he had not sold the assets earlier because he had lost 200 million won, but very soon he is earning 300 million won per hour. He breathes a sigh of relief but still doesn't understand what to do with the assets. He is mentally exhausted because he spent the whole weekend watching the Bitcoin rate. He is tormented by doubts about when to sell assets and whether it is worth doing so at all. But then the weekend passes and he goes back to work in the office. During lunch, he listens to colleagues discuss real estate investments. Lucas ultimately failed to rest properly and therefore was not focused enough. Now he has 40 billion won in his account and is wondering if the price of Bitcoin can go even higher. The colleagues are curious to know how his and Sue's trip to Busan went, and the man says it was calm. Lucas's older colleagues make friendly jokes about this. Lucas's colleagues return to discussing investments again. The manager that Lucas is seconding in command to says he is thinking about investing in Bitcoin, which makes Lucas sweat. Men think that they should have invested earlier, then they would have earned more. They decide to take a closer look at the possibility of investing in Bitcoin. Talk about cryptocurrency is becoming more and more lively. This time, Lucas focused his attention on the conversation. After hearing his colleagues' discussions, he decides that Bitcoin will continue to grow. This makes him consumed by greed, wanting to wait and not sell his assets yet. He continues to closely monitor the price changes of Bitcoin in the market. Lucas is shocked that the price of Bitcoin has dropped dramatically recently, and he has lost 6 billion won. During another break at work, he goes out to get some fresh air. The lost money haunts him. Lucas can't come to his senses. The amount he lost while waiting could have been his salary for 140 years of work. He immediately grabs his phone to check his assets. Lucas is overcome with anxiety and wonders whether he should sell his bitcoins immediately. There's no need to be greedy anymore. He already has more than 30 billion won. However, at this moment, Lucas's colleagues approach him, wanting to know what he is doing. Lucas jumps in surprise, not expecting to be interrupted. Lucas's colleague smirks when he sees him researching the Bitcoin rate. He asks the man if he wants to invest in Bitcoins, and Lucas sweats nervously as he thinks of an answer. Colleagues are sure that since Lucas doesn't look well, there must be some problems with the investment. He does not name the actual amount, but his colleagues still support him and wish him good luck. Lucas sighed heavily, wondering if the price of Bitcoin would really go up any further. He asks his colleagues if they have seen the recent price collapse. The men look at each other, smile, and shake their heads. Lucas tries to find out what is the reason for such smiles, and one of his colleagues says that he does not follow the news. He shows the current Bitcoin rate, and Lucas is completely speechless. The price jumped up again and quite strongly. He even starts to cry from relief. His colleagues courageously support Lucas and convince him that the real takeoff is just beginning. It turns out that one of them bought Bitcoins and has already earned more than 1 million won. However, Lucas is still terrified of falling again. The men's confidence, however, gives him hope that perhaps he can wait a little longer, and literally the next day, there is a sharp jump in the price of Bitcoin. This is shaking the world community, and everyone is talking about nothing but cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is becoming a store of value superior to gold, and now on yet another day the price of Bitcoin reaches an exorbitant figure. As a result, Lucas's current assets exceed 100 billion won. When a man sees the final amount, he starts to get hysterical. His heart is beating wildly, he is sweating, and he cannot breathe normally. So all Lucas can do is try to breathe calmly and cry. The man forces himself to calm down, reminds himself that it is not his money until he sells his assets. Now it's really time for him to make a decision. He can't put it off any longer. So Lucas is tormented by whether he should sell everything or wait further. Not accustomed to such sums, he is afraid of making the wrong move. Greed instantly takes hold of him, convincing him that he can earn more. Dark thoughts overwhelm Lucas. He wants to earn tens of billions just by sitting still. Therefore, submitting to these thoughts, he first decides to wait a little longer, but then his father's voice comes into his memory, the one who once convinced him that everything would work out. Lucas looks at a framed photograph of his father on the cabinet. His father once believed that buying new currency was his chance to become a good person and parent. When his father spent time gambling, he always promised to buy Lucas new clothes and a bag if he won big. He had been putting life on hold all this time, and Lucas realized it was time to make a change. The next day, Sue is busy in the office typing up important documents. She stretches with pleasure to relieve the fatigue of sitting in one place for a long time. Sue notes that Lucas never showed up at the office after they returned. The girl approaches one of the managers and presents the results of her work, and he thanks her for her work. The manager tells the girl that Lucas took a day off, so he is not in the office. Sue hopes that nothing serious happened to the man. Meanwhile, Lucas finally leaves the house and goes shopping. His first destination is a car dealership. The salon employee asks if the client has any wishes. Lucas feels awkward, but one car still catches his attention. It turns out to be a recently released white Ferrari model designed for both city driving and sports. Lucas decides to buy it, but when the salon employee starts talking about payment options, he interrupts him. He hands over a bank card, offering to make the purchase immediately because he plans to pay for his new car in one lump sum. The day before, Lucas sold his assets and earned 100 million won. Now Lucas is young and rich, a very pleased with himself man. However, he does not immediately understand what to do with such huge amounts of money. He decides to buy a car first, and now he will have to wait for it to be delivered from the showroom. Having spent a huge amount of money by the old standards, Lucas leaves the salon. He belatedly panics at the fact that he has spent almost 500 million won. Nevertheless, he took the first step towards pleasant and important spending. He once made this list when he could only dream of wealth, and the next item on this list is buying a luxury apartment. At the real estate agency, the employees actively welcome Lucas. Lucas says he needs a spacious apartment in a new building with a view of the Han River, since this is usually very expensive real estate. The agency employees are very interested in such a client, so Lucas and his realtor go to look at one of the options. It is a very large and newly built complex, and it will cost the hero 2 billion won to live in it. The realtor tells the man about the bonuses of the area, such as walking paths, gardens, and a swimming pool. Another big advantage of the residential complex is the gym. The apartment they are going to look at is on the 11th floor, and the realtor calls Lucas to follow him. As in many Korean apartments, the door is opened with a key card. Stepping inside, Lucas feels overwhelmed by the size of the apartment. It is so big that you can go jogging on it in the morning. The realtor tells the shocked client that the apartment is fully furnished, with furniture made from the highest quality materials. The girl shows 2 bathrooms, each larger than the apartment Lucas currently lives in. He jokes that there is no need to worry about mosquitoes or noise outside the window, and the realtor replies that this is one of the advantages of high-rise buildings. For Lucas, this place is so luxurious that he would be willing to live in less comfortable conditions. He opens the window and is speechless at the view of the river that opens up to him. It is so beautiful and impressive that the man admires it out loud. The realtor asks for the client's opinion and offers to show other options, but Lucas is satisfied with this apartment. He turns to the girl accompanying him and says that he will take this option. At the real estate agency, they prepare a contract for him, which Lucas signs immediately. Lucas is asked to pay a down payment and a brokerage commission to move in. However, the man takes out the suitcase he brought with him and replies that he will pay the entire amount at once. He opens the suitcase and specifies that the amount will be paid in cash. While the girls look in horror at the amount of cash, Lucas asks them to provide a check for the broker's commission. Meanwhile, in the office where Lucas works, the manager is flirting with his colleague in the storage room. He took her to a restaurant the day before and suggests they try a better place. He captivates the girl with his night look, smiling, and the girl gives in to his flirting. Suddenly, the flirting is interrupted by Sue bursting into the storage room and quickly approaching manager Dan. After waiting for Dan's girlfriend to move away a little, Sue moves closer. She comes very close, wanting to talk to the man about something important. The man is stunned by such an attack and does not understand what questions Sue could have for him. Sue looks menacingly at her colleague and asks if he knows where Dan lives. Dan doesn't understand why a popular girl like Sue needs Lucas's address. The girl replies that she wants to visit him because she is worried about Lucas's long absence from work. Dan can't help but wonder if Sue is so worried about all of her colleagues. However, he also doesn't know where Lucas lives. But he can call him and ask. He eventually contacts Lucas on Messenger, and he agrees to give them the address. Seeing such an active reaction, Dan wonders if Sue has become interested in his senior colleague. As Dan looks at her, Sue almost hums with joy at the upcoming meeting. After work, Sue and Dan, having bought some treats for Lucas, go to his house. Sue thinks about what Lucas's house might be like because she is very curious. She thinks that his apartment is small since he lives alone, and it is probably neat and clean. Dan is also trying to imagine what Lucas's apartment is like. He thinks it's minimalist because he still lives where he lived before they got married. They arrive in the area where Lucas lives, and it doesn't look like what they expected. Once inside the apartment, Dan and Sue recoil in shock and horror. Lucas thanks them for coming and apologizes for having to use the excuse of feeling unwell at work. The apartment they find themselves in turns out to be dirtier and more musty than Dan and Sue thought. However, Lucas is not worried about the fact that it is not tidy, as he is preparing to move. Dan winces in horror as the apartment looks more like a warehouse than a home, and stinks badly. Lucas explains that it has nothing to do with the house, but rather that there is a sewer leak nearby. Sue touches the wall with her fingers, which is heavily covered in black mold. Tears well up in the girl's eyes at the thought that he had lived in such an apartment alone all this time. Dan watches surreptitiously as Sue trembles with emotion, so he decides to help Lucas with the move and help pack the boxes. Sue supports this idea. Lucas clarifies if everything is okay because the heroes can get dirty, but for them, it is nothing. The hero is grateful to his colleagues for their concern and help. They walk out into the parking lot, and Dan looks at one of the cars in surprise. Of course, his attention is focused on the latest Ferrari model. He doesn't understand what such a luxurious car is doing in this place. Dan thinks he'd like to take a closer look at her, but he feels awkward in front of his colleagues. Noticing his interest, Lucas calmly approaches the Ferrari and offers to put the boxes in it. Dan and Sue are speechless at the unexpectedness of this proposal. At first, Dan thinks that Lucas rented this car for the move, and when the hero says that this is his car, Dan breaks out in a sweat from shock. The heroes think that Lucas has come into an inheritance. Otherwise, they cannot explain where he got a 400 million won car from. However, all Dan can think about is how much he wants to ride it. Lucas invites his assistants to look at the apartment they are moving to. Dan and Sue are certainly on board with this, as they are very curious to see Lucas's new place of residence. However, there is only one passenger seat in the car, and only one person can travel with him. Sue is sure that she will have to travel separately because she is the youngest. However, when she is about to propose, Dan says that he will go separately. The girl is surprised by this offer, but Dan says that he still needs to pick up the car. He walks to the car, promising to follow Lucas and Sue. However, he cries because he also wants to ride in a Ferrari, and he made this decision to give Sue time with someone she likes. Lucas turns to Sue, saying that this is the first time they've been alone since their trip to Busan. Sue reveals that her parents have identified Lucas as the man she plans to marry soon. In response, Lucas teases the girl, wondering whether he should play the role of her husband, which makes Sue blush. Sue is a little hesitant, not knowing how to broach the subject that worries her. Lucas watches her awkward attempts and chuckles good-naturedly. The girl waves her hand, not wanting to ruin the moment with awkward questions, although she is very curious to know more about Lucas's ex-wife. The man thanks her for the sensitivity and care that she and Dan show by not asking difficult questions and being patient. Blushing, Sue replies that she will definitely ask questions when Lucas is ready. She tries to find out where he is moving, but Lucas wants to keep the intrigue. At this time, a telephone conversation takes place between the director of the company and an unknown woman. She says that she is sorting through old things and she is looking at photographs. One of these photographs shows Maria and Lucas during their wedding. The woman's fingers squeeze the photograph aggressively, crumpling it. The girl speaking on the phone turns out to be Maria herself, Lucas's ex-wife. It's been 6 months since the divorce, and she decides to return to work in the office where Lucas works. Lucas's new car races through the streets, sparkling with its cleanliness and well-groomed appearance. It's led by Dan, who Lucas allowed to do this, and he's so happy he's crying. Lucas warns him to be careful not to kill them both, but Dan is too happy to hear him. He has a question for Lucas, and wants to know if he can ask it. To Lucas's surprise, Dan asks him how the man feels about Sue. Lucas doesn't understand why his colleague is asking such sudden questions, but Dan says he's just curious. Lucas doesn't see anything fishy in the question and considers what he can say. He reflects on how Sue is kind, capable, caring, and overall a good girl. Dan tries to find out if that's all, but Lucas doesn't know what else his colleague wants to hear. At work, during a break, senior colleagues pounce on him with questions about his new car. Everyone noticed the Ferrari in the parking lot and assumed that Lucas had gotten rich from investments. Lucas says he increased his capital by reinvesting his earnings and mortgaging his property. Lucas's colleagues, on the contrary, lost part of their funds in bitcoins. That's why they turned to Lucas for advice as a more successful investor. The men are confident that Lucas is well-versed in investment matters and is making new plans. However, Lucas doesn't know what to tell them, whether to make up a legend or tell the whole truth. Lucas replies that to invest successfully, you need to have the heart of a beast. He understands that this question could confuse his colleagues, and still decides to tell the truth. However, the colleagues understand the advice in their own way, deciding that psychology is important in this matter, not technology. The manager asks if Lucas invests in other types of cryptocurrencies, and the man says he has invested in 2 more. After purchasing a house and a car, he reinvested the rest of his assets into cryptocurrency. However, he is afraid to give advice, lest he be held responsible for the outcome. Lucas's cryptocurrencies of choice were Ripple and Ethereum. They are brand new, so his colleagues were curious about the reason for this choice, and Lucas says he thinks they are reliable. Ripple supports international transactions between banks, and Ethereum supports transactions using blockchain technology. Lucas believes that these are the cryptocurrencies that will attract the attention of the media and investors. Lucas has really done some serious research into new cryptocurrencies. At this time, Sue is tidying herself up in the ladies' room when she thinks about Lucas. She hears other girls talking. They discuss gossip about Lucas and the Ferrari he bought. No one believes that he is so rich. Sue is not surprised that rumors have already spread throughout the company. One of the girls claims that Lucas took out loans to buy the car, and many also discuss that he gambles and likes to drink. One of the girls is disappointed. She had no idea that Lucas was such an unworthy person. Sue, not wanting to hear any more of Lucas's slander, approaches the girls. They sweat from Sue's abrupt interruption of their conversation. Sue is surrounded by a dark and threatening energy, and she really wants to know who is spreading such rumors about Lucas. At this time, Lucas's ex-wife comes to the office where he works. Maria tries to find out from the manager, who recognizes her where Lucas is. The man tries to discourage her and says that Maria's ex-husband is not there. He offers to pass messages to Lucas if the girl wants. But then Lucas enters the office with boxes full of documents. It wobbles slightly, and the boxes are leaning dangerously, threatening to fall. Maria holds the boxes that are ready to collapse, and Lucas thanks her. And then he realizes who helped him. He recognizes the woman in front of him and feels the first wave of panic. Maria warns Lucas to be careful in the office. She wants to know how her ex-husband is doing, but Lucas doesn't believe the woman for a second. Memories of their honeymoon come flooding back to his mind when Maria scolded him for a long time for booking the wrong hotel, one that was unsuitable for her. Lucas tries to justify himself by saying that he chose this hotel based on reviews from other guests, but the girl is still unhappy. Maria does not want to listen to him. Throughout their marriage, the girl humiliated him and made him guilty of everything, convincing him that she had shown him a favor with their marriage. That's why Maria is sure that she still has such power over her ex-husband. However, Lucas is not the same as before, even if their meeting did throw him off balance for a while. Maria says that she wants to give him some documents, and the man sighs long and heavily. Then he puts the boxes on the floor with a loud bang, which makes Maria flinch. Colleagues turn to look at them, trying to understand what is happening. Looking calmly into Maria's eyes as he never did before, Lucas takes the documents from her, and then he leaves, pretending that this meeting did not bother him at all. Maria gets angry at this reaction and bites her lips, trying not to yell at the man in front of her colleagues. She leaves the office, remembering that before, Lucas couldn't even look her straight in the eye. But after the divorce, he changed. So much. She's angry that Lucas bought a Ferrari after the divorce, and if she had been patient in the marriage, she could have taken the car. But now that she has missed this chance, Maria wants to create a new one. She returns to her office, in tears, looking very unhappy. Colleagues immediately rush to her to support her after a meeting with her ex-husband. Maria immediately portrays Lucas as a monster, lying that he yelled and humiliated her. The head of the department silently watches this performance. She sighs, not sharing her colleagues' worries. She sees Maria's pretense. Meanwhile, Lucas is quietly working in his office, thinking about what happened. He knew that sooner or later Maria would return to work after their separation. He wondered how he would feel if he met the girl again, but it turned out not to be that bad. The manager comes up behind him and asks if Lucas is sure everything is okay. He calls the younger one to the roof, where his colleague immediately attacks him with hugs. He thanks Lucas for the advice that allowed him to make good profits. Lucas doesn't understand the reason, and his colleague suggests checking the quotes. It turns out that Ripple has grown by 70% in price this morning. Lucas wonders how much money he now has uncounted, and he tries to count it. It turns out that Lucas's assets already amount to 98 million won. Colleagues, having invested in Ripple, earned several of their annual salaries. The manager thanks Lucas for everything he has done for them, but Lucas believes that it is their own responsibility. Colleagues are trying to find out how much he himself invested in Ripple. Lucas decides not to tell the truth, but to make up something credible. So, he says that he invested 1 billion won each in Ripple and Ethereum. Everyone is surprised at how much Lucas has invested and earned from it. The hero refuses to give advice because investing is a personal responsibility. However, he himself says that he will not sell Ripple for now, but will wait a little longer. Rumors that Lucas has hit the jackpot with cryptocurrency quickly spread throughout the company. Lucas's success at such a young age is the talk of the office. People also talk about Lucas's colleagues following his example and investing successfully. However, recently someone has been spreading bad rumors that he beat his ex-wife and took money from her. Maria overhears her ex's colleagues deciding that someone is spreading bad rumors specifically to defame Lucas. She is furious that her plan is failing and people are defending Lucas instead of vilifying him. In her irritation, she almost gives away her presence and hurries away. All that remained where she had stood was a crumpled drink cup. It's lunchtime, and the heroes go on break. Sue sits thoughtfully by the window in the cafe, looking out the window as if waiting for someone. The men present in the cafe stare at her and openly admire her. However, Sue looks very nervous and agitated. She turns pale. Dan appears in the cafe and calls the girl by name. He is carrying a tray with their drinks. He asks how long Sue waited, but she says she just arrived. Dan called her to this cafe to tell her something special about Lucas. Dan wants to ask her a question first, and then discuss the rest. He asks Sue what she thinks about recent rumors. about Lucas's gambling addiction and cruelty to his wife. Sue exclaims sharply that all these rumors are ridiculous and she does not believe them at all. Someone is spreading them maliciously. This answer satisfies Dan, and he decides to ask the girl something else. Finally, Dan asks Sue if she is in love with Lucas. This makes Sue blush deeply and becomes speechless with embarrassment. She screams and stutters, trying to dissuade Dan from his words. Dan chuckles and asks the girl not to pretend. He understands everything and wants to help. Dan tells the girl to go to Lucas right now and confess her feelings. At this time, Lucas is on a break again and receives hugs from happy colleagues. Trusting Lucas's instincts, his colleagues decided to wait with the sale of assets. And they were right. Lucas is not very happy that the number of people thanking him has increased significantly. Colleagues begin to thank him because thanks to Lucas's advice, they were able to solve their financial difficulties. After rumors of Lucas hitting the jackpot, most of the company's employees got involved in the cryptocurrency game. Soon, everyone who trusted Lucas and invested in Ripple received huge profits. Colleagues call Lucas a financial god and confess their love to him. One of his colleagues tries to figure out how much money Lucas has earned, and he tries to get out of it. Lucas currently has 578 billion won in his account. In fact, for the same amount of money as Lucas, you could buy almost any company. When Lucas invested in new cryptocurrencies, he thought their prices would rise. However, he could not even imagine that in a month the situation could become so crazy. The hero counted on human greed, but growth was still too fast. The girls from the office also join their colleagues to get investment advice from Lucas. The hero replies that investing right now is a bit risky. The price has gone up too much lately, which means it could fall too much. The girls thank him for the advice and ask what other investment options there are. Maria is furious about the active attention paid to her ex-husband. Out of frustration, she locks herself in the restroom and kicks the trash can. Maria is angry that everyone is praising someone she considers a fool. The girl's pride is hurt, and she comes up with a plan to use Lucas. She wants to destroy Lucas's reputation and take over his money. Lucas calmly studies the chats on his phone and sees that everyone is also discussing cryptocurrency. However, suddenly he receives a notification that shocks him. Maria writes to him, asking how things are as if nothing happened between them. She writes that she was wrong and then invites him on a date. Lucas wants to delete the useless correspondence, but then Sue calls him. He immediately picks up the phone, quickly interested in the reason for the call. Sue, worried, says that nothing special happened. She sits at home in her pajamas, hugging a stuffed animal, and replies that she just wanted to talk to Lucas. He asks if Sue herself is resting, and the girl says that she recently returned from training. Lucas plans to go shopping the next day, because he threw out his old furniture. Sue is very keen to join him on this shopping trip. The man hesitates to answer, which makes his colleague worry. However, after just a few seconds, he makes an appointment with her during the day at the shopping center. They say goodnight to each other, and then Sue screams into her pillow in delight, trying to come to her senses at the wrong time. The girl's memory flashes back to her conversation with Dan and how he pushed her to confess. Sue isn't sure she can do it, but she wants to try her best. The next day comes, and Lucas rushes to the mall. He arrives early enough that it makes him sigh heavily. He is already thinking about waiting for Sue in some cafe, but suddenly Sue calls out to him. She also arrives early in such a hurry to see Lucas. She literally beams with joy, and men turn to look at her. Lucas notices that the girl calls him informally at work, and he gives permission for this, after which Sue calls him to go inside the shopping center. The girl secretly watches her companion and admires him. She is happy that Lucas agreed to take her with him for a walk. The two of them go to the mall to do the shopping that Lucas had planned. At this time, the forgotten Maria is waiting for Lucas in the cafe and is furious that he is late, although he did not plan to come at all. There are a lot of people in the shopping center, and the employees greet Lucas and Sue politely when they arrive. The girl notes that this is the first time she has been alone with him outside of work. She imagines that it could be a date with Lucas. Suddenly, Lucas draws the girl's attention to something, inviting her to look. A man chooses new blankets for himself and finds a very soft one. Sue is pleased to see her companion so excited during their shopping trip. This is the first time Lucas has seen such soft and cozy blankets because he is used to using only thick and heavy blankets. So delighted, he decides to buy 3 sets of blankets at once. Before he has time to make a purchase, he already finds something new. This time, Lucas's attention is drawn to a new cordless vacuum cleaner. Then there is a refrigerator, in the door of which there is a touchscreen. The washer and dryer are also an important interior element in Lucas's new home. The hero's attention is also drawn to the sofa, the angle of which can be adjusted. For the first time in his life, Lucas spends money without thinking, and it makes him happy. The man admits that the mall is an interesting place when you're rich. Lucas feels like he enabled a cheat code in a game when he was a kid. The hero decides to ask Sue if she finds it boring to go shopping with him, but the girl is delighted. However, besides the fun, Sue feels a lot of strange feelings, mainly because Dan said that she had to confess her feelings to Lucas. The girl realizes that she really can't hesitate forever. She wants to try to tell Lucas everything, but when she starts to confess, Lucas interrupts her. They shudder with embarrassment and look into each other's eyes. Sue offers to let the man speak first, but Lucas cedes the right to her. However, the girl still persuades him to speak first. What Lucas said makes Sue stare at him in surprise. She even asks again if Lucas really meant what he said. All this time, Maria, who was sitting in the cafe waiting for Lucas, clenches her fists in rage because he did not come to the meeting. During another break during the working day in the office, employees rejoice at the growth of the Ripple rate. The men loudly encourage themselves and each other. Lucas's company is looking at this from the outside, noting that there are even more people investing in cryptocurrency. One of the shouters is a man who previously derided cryptocurrency as a form of gambling. However, in addition to the rise in the price of Ripple, the price of Ethereum is also rising, so Lucas is very happy. The man thinks that the huge profits from cryptocurrency can turn even those who criticized it into fanatics. Greed, according to Lucas, unites people, but no one knows the result. In a lucky moment, investments can bring huge profits, but if the price falls, a person may lose everything down to the last one. Lucas admits that he is no exception, and he too has to obey these rules. His father also taught him that winning at the gaming table does not mean getting money, but you can receive money at a completely different time. Lucas believes that you need to overcome greed and wake up because you get money when you get up from the gaming table. In work chats, they discuss investments and thank Lucas for valuable advice. This infuriates his colleague Jack, who has long considered cryptocurrency an unworthy business. He thinks that Lucas was just lucky and that he doesn't really understand anything. Jack believes that he is the only one doing real investing. He is happy that he earned 100 million won in a month and believes that his life will soon turn around. The man dreams of buying a luxury apartment with a view of the Han River and a sports car. Jack also wants to marry Sue, with whom he has long been in love. In the chat, Lucas makes an important announcement regarding cryptocurrency. He says that he is going to sell everything. A senior colleague thinks this is stupid because Lucas could earn much more. Jack aggressively types messages in the chat, saying that what Lucas said is complete nonsense and that no one should sell cryptocurrency now. He believes that if Lucas decides to pass up such an opportunity, he is a complete amateur. Lucas answers some of the messages without trying to persuade anyone, after which he puts the phone aside and thinks about his next steps. Now he wants to meet with his boss to discuss an important issue. He heads to work at the office, ready for a serious conversation. The man goes up to the desired floor and approaches his manager. He asks if the manager has a minute to talk. The manager notices the bundle of papers in Lucas's hands. He understands that Lucas wants to tell him something really important. He sighs heavily, thinking that the conversation will be about resignation. So he calls Lucas to go somewhere else, to the roof, where they usually spend their breaks. The manager happily congratulates Lucas on his increased wealth. After all, Lucas was already rich, and now he was supposed to become even richer. The manager himself earned enough money to drink for the rest of his life. He decides to push Lucas to talk about what's bothering him. Lucas clutches the application papers in his hands, nervous to start the conversation. The manager doesn't want to say goodbye to a good employee who also gives good advice. Lucas asks for a 2-week vacation and asks if it is possible to take it. The news that Lucas has a leave application in his hands and not a resignation letter pleases the manager. The manager thought that since Lucas had earned so much, he could already retire, but the hero himself is not ready for this yet. He didn't even think about quitting. He recalls meeting Sue and telling her that he was planning to go to the States for about 2 weeks. He thinks about what to do with the money he earns and decides that he needs to gain more experience and knowledge. Lucas wants to take the opportunity to study in America for a while. Because of his confession, Sue hesitates to confess her feelings to Lucas. She just wants Lucas to have a good time on his trip. The manager agrees to sign Lucas's vacation papers. Lucas asks his older colleague if he can continue living like this. He made a lot of money on cryptocurrency, but doesn't know what to do next. He doesn't have a hobby or a dream, because he didn't have time to think about such things before. Lucas realizes that he has always envied people who have a dream, for those who have professionally performed singing on stage and enjoyed music, for those who have been involved in sports since their youth and built their careers on it, to those who spent their time painting, because these people had dreams and passion that he did not have. The manager says that not all people can have a dream, and not having a dream is just as normal as being an ordinary person. Lucas had never thought about it and didn't know that it could be normal. The manager tells Lucas that as a child, he dreamed of becoming a professional golfer. His parents supported him because they enjoyed golf. That's why the man, with the support of his parents, prepared to become a professional from the age of 10. He had injured himself more than once, and his hands were covered in bruises and calluses. But as a child, it was enough for him to just hold a stick in his hands. The manager was happy as a child thanks to his dream. However, soon enough, he found out what was behind his dream. He learned that a lot of money was spent on tuition and field fees, which was ruining their family. As a result, the man gave up his dream but now lives quite well. Now he has another dream, and he is striving to make it come true. Now he just wants to go to a baseball game with his family. He advises Lucas not to get too hung up on his dream, as he can achieve everything he wants in his lifetime. The manager advises Lucas to enjoy life and do whatever he wants. Lucas listens to his senior colleague's words with respect and draws conclusions for himself. He decides to move step by step to formulate new dreams for himself. The manager finally decides to ask Lucas himself a question. He is very interested in how much money he actually made. He promises to keep the information a secret. To avoid answering directly, Lucas asks how much an apartment in the Gangnam area currently costs. Having finally figured out how much it came out to, he whispers the final number into the manager's ear. The manager is so shocked by the answer that he breaks out in a sweat. He asks incredulously if Lucas really has such means. The manager smiles at how ridiculously rich Lucas is. After all, Lucas's current assets could be thought of as 1,000 apartments in Gangnam. With his leave, Lucas sets off on his American journey. The last time the man flew to a seminar in Germany, but that was a long time ago. Now he can afford comfortable conditions for the flight. He is warmly greeted by the flight attendants, and Lucas is delighted by such respectful treatment. He only had experience flying in economy class, which was cramped and uncomfortable. Now he is flying first class for the first time, sitting in a comfortable seat and able to relax. Suddenly he hears a female voice from the side discussing design issues. In the next row sits a beautiful brunette who is talking on the phone about the development of the automobile industry in Korea. The girl notices that Lucas is watching her. He waves his hand to the girl in greeting without any embarrassment. His neighbor ends her business conversation with a request to send documents by email. In case of emergency, she apologizes to Lucas for talking on the phone in the salon, but the man is understanding. Having studied Lucas with her eyes, the stranger finds him quite interesting. She hands Lucas a business card and introduces herself. As the CEO of an automobile company, her name is Chloe. Lucas is surprised that Chloe is so young and already an executive director. He introduces himself to the girl but says that he did not bring business cards. The man's position puzzles Chloe because she didn't think that an ordinary employee could afford to travel first class. Lucas explains almost immediately that his capital now depends mainly on investments. On the plane, Lucas and Chloe are served a delicious dinner of steak and wine. The man's eyes literally glow with this food and his mouth waters in anticipation. He cuts a juicy steak with a knife and puts a piece of meat into his mouth. The taste of the dish shocks him from the first bite. Lucas eats something so delicious for the first time. Lucas closes his eyes in pleasure, delighted by the combination of meat juice and sauce. He also really liked the wine, and in general, the whole meal was a pleasant surprise for him. While Chloe eats her portion in complete calm, Lucas wonders if he can ask for more wine. Chloe still doesn't understand how a regular employee can afford to fly first class. Lucas notices that his neighbor is looking at him very closely. Their eyes meet, and Chloe feels uneasy about her surveillance being discovered. Lucas unexpectedly compliments her good posture, surprising Chloe. He says that he also looks at the girl because of her confident posture and her skills with a fork and knife. Chloe is very embarrassed by such detailed compliments addressed to her. However, she quickly calms down and remains pleased with such attention. Lucas looks at the image of a beautiful girl standing next to a car. It's a concept for a car commercial for the company Chloe runs, and he finds it interesting. The girl actively says that they create cars for both the Korean and American markets and asks what kind of car Lucas himself has. When the girl learns about the Ferrari, she is again at a loss as to who her neighbor is. While Chloe talks about plans to release sports and electric cars, Lucas remembers that he drove her company's cars. The girl is very interested in hearing feedback, but when she receives criticism of technical features, she feels awkward. Apparently, Chloe did not expect such a detailed answer and comments about the shortcomings. Lucas can't help but notice how much he has changed because before, he wouldn't have expressed his thoughts so boldly. He thinks about the confidence that money gives him. To lighten the mood, he points out that Chloe seems to really like cars, and she says it's been a passion since childhood. She loves driving different cars and recently had an interesting experience with a Mini in the UK. The girl actively talks about her impressions, and Lucas thinks about how nice it is to see a person who is passionate about their work. However, throughout their flight, Chloe constantly bombards him with various information about cars. Lucas couldn't get any rest during the flight because of her chatter. That's why he's very happy to arrive at San Francisco Airport. He and Chloe shake hands, and the girl asks to contact her when Lucas returns to Korea. The girl smiles and wishes Lucas a good trip. A rather exhausted Lucas wishes her all the best in return. He decides that next time he should behave more modestly and not make acquaintances. After collecting his luggage, the man finally leaves the San Francisco airport. He finds himself in an unfamiliar environment and opens his mouth in surprise, looking at people of different races and skin colors. He finally realizes that he is indeed in America. Suddenly, someone from behind loudly calls the man's name. Lucas turns around and sees Charlie, his old friend, running towards him. The men shake hands and joke with each other. Charlie is Lucas's closest friend, sharing all the hardships with him when they lived together during college. Afterwards, he managed to move to the States and settle here, and America changed the man quite a lot. Charlie invites Lucas to lunch, and the man is surprised when he managed to make a reservation, to which Charlie laughs that in America, you have to eat hamburgers. Meanwhile, in Korea, Maria is trying to contain her anger at lunch and destroys her salad with a fork. She is furious that Lucas not only ignores her, but also manages to cheat on her. She almost growls at the fact that she had to sacrifice her pride and write to her ex-husband, whom she despises. When colleagues ask what happened, Maria jokes that she was thinking about her ex-husband. She immediately starts saying the worst things she can think of about Lucas. He brings up gambling debts, betrayal, and domestic violence. However, she is immediately interrupted by the manager from her department, who says that it is Maria who is paying too much attention to Lucas. She smirks, noting with surprise that if she broke up with someone, the story would end in this way. She hints to her colleagues that they shouldn't trust Maria's words, and the girl almost explodes from such a hint. The manager adds that she tried not to interfere in their personal lives before, but the rumors that Maria spreads do not correspond with the reputation Lucas has received in the company. She openly accuses Maria of being jealous and trying to ruin Lucas's life. Maria is at first speechless from such a rebuff and does not know how to respond. However, her acting skills are immediately brought to the maximum. She starts crying loudly and rushes out of the office. The manager rolls his eyes at this behavior and sighs heavily. Maria runs into the women's restroom in a rage to avoid screaming right in the office. She kicks the trash can while screaming and calls the manager dirty names. However, she intends to ignore it and endure it further. Maria also succumbed to the fever of buying Ripple and was able to make good money on it. She is sure that she will become very rich and will have the last laugh. At this time, Lucas's colleague Jack, who was the loudest in shouting that Ripple couldn't be sold, boasts during the break that he was right. He mocks the skills of Lucas, who chickened out and didn't earn more. Jack convinces his colleagues that they should not sell but buy Ripple and tells them to trust him. Lucas's office colleagues watch his screams from the sidelines. One of them was worried when Lucas sold his assets and didn't know what to do. Next, as profits continue to grow, he finds it difficult to fight greed. All day long, he thinks about nothing but investments as stock prices rise. The manager, in response to this, calmly states that he sold all the Ripple that he had in his assets. This shocks his colleague as the investment is bringing in huge profits every day. But the manager shrugs, trusting Lucas to take the bold step of selling. In response to the younger man's suspicious look, he philosophically remarks that the cryptocurrency will continue to grow regardless of people's actions and that more can be bought. But in order to sell assets that are rising in price and time, skill is required, So when Lucas said he was selling all his assets, he felt confident to do the same. Meanwhile, in San Francisco, Lucas and Charlie are sitting at a burger joint. An cute waitress brings them their order. Lucas really likes the prepared burgers from the first bite, and Charlie is happy about it. He sympathizes with Lucas's expensive trip, but promises to make his stay at his home comfortable. Lucas is touched that his friend is willing to take care of him even though he knows nothing about his financial situation. Suddenly, someone calls out to the men having lunch, and Charlie turns towards the source of the sound. A non-Asian boy and girl approach them, both with blonde hair and speaking unaccented English. In America, Charlie is sometimes called by his nickname, but he doesn't mind because it sounds cool. Their new interlocutors are Chris and Helen. Charlie became friends with them after moving. They sit down to eat together and discuss Charlie's work projects, which make a big contribution to the automobile industry. Charlie develops software for self-driving cars. Chris is the founder of a startup in this area, developing an autonomous driving system for installation on trucks. Helen also has her own startup company. She designs and manufactures clothes and shoes from environmentally friendly materials. Lucas is delighted that both of his new acquaintances are heads of companies. They discuss how starting a startup is very difficult, like climbing a snowy mountain. The path consists of attempts to implement your idea by any means and overcoming obstacles of varying complexity. But the moment the idea comes to fruition, you feel that it was all worth it. Lucas admits that he respects Chris and Helen very much for such courage. He looks at his new acquaintances with admiration. Chris replies that ideas are good, but they require talented people like Charlie to implement them since his programming. Skills allow him to implement any idea. However, he immediately makes fun of his friend, noting his great love for hamburgers. Watching their verbal spat, Lucas notes with satisfaction that it was only after arriving in America that he was able to meet the founders of his companies. He already feels that his trip to the States was fully justified by such an interesting experience. In the evening, they arrive at the apartment where Charlie lives. It is located in an ordinary apartment building. It is quite clean and well furnished, which Lucas did not expect. He learns that the rent for such a house is about 4 million won, or a little over $3,000. Charlie explains that real estate in the US is more expensive than in Korea, with real estate in San Francisco particularly expensive. He opens the refrigerator and throws a can of beer at his friend. Charlie thinks they should rinse their mouths after eating and discuss Lucas's travel plans. Charlie knows his friend too well to understand that Lucas would not have come to the States just like that. Lucas smiles contentedly, glad that his friend still understands him well. Sipping one can of beer after another, the men discuss what has happened during the years of their separation. Charlie is very happy about Lucas's divorce from Maria, whom he never liked. Lucas regrets going through the experience, but Charlie notes that it toughened the man up. However, Charlie is glad that his friend has become more confident and healed thanks to successful investments. He says that in America, many have hit the jackpot on cryptocurrency, and some are even creating it themselves to get rich. Charlie suggests that Lucas create his own cryptocurrency, and he is interested in this question. However, Lucas has another plan for now, and he asks Charlie for help. Charlie is interested in how he can support his old friend. Lucas's plan is to start his own company. Charlie believes that Lucas got this idea because he had too much to drink. However, Lucas became seriously interested in starting his own company after meeting Chris and Helen. To explain to his friend what the underground rocks might be, Charlie talks about 3 important components of startups. The first component is capital, that is, cash and other assets. The second component is a unique idea that would make the startup stand out in the market. And the third component is the abilities of the creator and representative of the startup. Even if a director has money and an idea, he can destroy a project without having the ability to manage, and vice versa. Having the ability but not having the initial capital can lead to failure. Lucas ponders what qualities a CEO needs, whether they include professionalism, intelligence, and energy. Charlie believes that running a company is not easy, and that if you have money, it is better to invest it. A friend's words make Lucas think about choosing a new life strategy. He decides to ask Charlie how to invest in companies correctly. After a detailed discussion of all the details, the next day, Lucas and Charlie set up a business meeting at a burger joint. It turns out that they invited Chris, whom Lucas recognized the day before during the conversation. Chris learns that Lucas has decided to invest in his startup. The men laugh at the fact that choosing a burger joint as a place for a business meeting is definitely an original decision. They discuss Chris's startup, about which Lucas has gathered all the information he needs. It turns out that the company has high growth and technological capabilities and therefore has already received an investment offer from a large Korean corporation. Chris tries to insist that they have a lot of offers, but Lucas thinks that he is actually hesitant. Such insight surprises the American, and he shudders at Lucas's words. Companies interested in Chris's startup demand good terms for themselves, but unfair ones for Chris. Lucas, on the other hand, wants to become a partner for the startup, not take it over. The initial offer to buy 10% of the shares for $500,000 shocks the American. In offering his investment terms, Lucas appears confident in his abilities. Chris, after listening to him, wants to check the documents first to make sure that Lucas can afford such an investment. At this time, Charlie eats burgers quite calmly, confident in the success of the deal. Chris looks over the papers carefully, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. He ends up offering to sell Lucas 10% of the shares for $700,000. Charlie immediately intervenes in the conversation and asks Chris not to inflate the price since he initially wanted $400,000. When Chris asks him not to interfere with the negotiations, Charlie points out that he was the one who advised Lucas to invest in his friend's startup. He makes his offer of 20% of the shares for $900,000. Charlie knows full well that the American has an acute shortage of capital due to the development of new technology. A large Korean company wants to acquire his startup, and if they don't come to an agreement, Chris will simply lose the right to manage his business. He assures his American friend that Lucas would not do something similar. He will take some shares as part of a fair investment deal and will not interfere with the management of the company. Therefore, he recommends that Chris carefully consider their offer and see the greater benefit in it. Chris swallows nervously in response to his words, but realizes that he has no choice. He extends his hand to Lucas to shake and announces that they are now partners. Lucas, as an investor, will be looking forward to seeing the company grow. When they go outside and he looks at the signed papers, he thinks that regardless of the outcome, this is a good experience. He is very grateful to Charlie for his help and support in his new endeavor. Charlie's knowledge turned out to be much broader than he expected, and he has an excellent understanding of the internal workings of companies. That's why Lucas decides to make sure to repay him for the opportunity he received. He talks about his strong love for his friend, but he just waves it off in embarrassment. Lucas asks for recommendations for a few more companies to invest in. Charlie laughs that he can't stop thinking about work, and Lucas actually wonders how things are going at the office. Meanwhile, Chloe, who was on the plane with Lucas, learns that an American startup has rejected their investment proposal. It turns out that it was her company that wanted to take over Chris's business. An employee of her company reports that their plan has failed. The girl is stunned that Chris sold the shares to a new investor, but Chris is not alone, as several other companies have chosen to partner with a private investor rather than Chloe's company. The girl frowns when she hears that this unknown investor is one person. Usually she is more perceptive, but here she managed not to know some major player in the investment market. She orders her employee to find out as much as possible about this investor in order to buy his shares. Now, Chloe's goal is to find her competitor, but she doesn't yet suspect that it is Lucas. Meanwhile, all over the world, the price of Ripple begins to fall at an incredible rate. This drop is being actively discussed in Lucas's company work chats. Everyone is in a panic. Lucas's colleagues begin to blame Jack, who persuaded them to invest in Ripple for their financial losses. Jack feels pressured by his colleagues to take responsibility. Many of the company's employees lost several million won in a week. Maria, who also suffered great losses although she boasted so much that she was more successful than Lucas, watches this squabble in horror. Jack immediately starts yelling at the others that they shouldn't have blindly believed his words and that they themselves are to blame for their losses. Everyone is very disappointed in him, as the man was very active in forcing everyone to give up selling cryptocurrency. One of his colleagues grabs him by the collar and shakes him hard, starting a scuffle. Dan, who did not believe Lucas's words and did not sell the cryptocurrency on time, feels the bitterness of defeat. He looks thoughtfully at the sky, trying not to despair about what is happening. Dan regrets giving in to the impulse of greed instead of listening to his friend's advice. He decides to sell all his assets now while there is at least some chance to make money and not fall into complete despair. He sighs dreamily and wonders what Lucas is up to while they're going through tough times. Meanwhile, Lucas is hiding in a destroyed building, reloading his pistol. He is covered in sweat and dust, breathing heavily and listening to footsteps. Outside, there are several such buildings in a large area, so he hopes that he will not be found right away. But the enemies are close, and he is forced to open fire to protect himself. He yells at Charlie behind him that if this continues, they're both screwed. But Charlie is already lying practically dead, face down on the ground. He apologizes to Lucas for not being able to help him and for letting him down. Before Lucas can rush towards him, he receives a series of shots in the back. He falls to the ground next to Charlie, who screams and calls his name. The man who shot Lucas in the back stands quietly behind, watching the men. Suddenly, he pulls out another weapon from behind his back, which turns out to be a frying pan. He begins to beat Lucas and Charlie, who are lying on the ground with a frying pan, forcing them to completely admit defeat. As a result, the exhausted and beaten men can only lie there and regret what happened. It turns out that Lucas and Charlie were playing a computer game all this time. Lucas is very happy that his friend helped him invest in several startups. In gratitude for this, he decided to give the person who supports him so much a new apartment. At first, Charlie refused, insisting that he was not helping Lucas out of any self-interest. However, Lucas found a way to convince him and show his appreciation. He equipped the apartment he gave Charlie with the latest technology. It had a powerful computer, various gaming consoles, and machines. Such an apartment could not fail to captivate a man at first sight, so Charlie accepted her on the condition that Lucas would continue to live with him. During another game, Lucas tells his friend that he is thinking about going on a trip to America. Charlie is surprised by the length of his friend's vacation, but it turns out that Lucas made a deal with his boss and extended it. Charlie doesn't usually get to travel, but he thinks Lucas's idea sounds interesting. Suddenly, an idea comes to his mind that he urgently wants to tell Lucas. He asks his friend to do him a favor, and Lucas agrees without even knowing what it is, smiling slightly. Charlie explains that his request is related to Lucas's journey. Lucas regrets agreeing to his friend's request from the very beginning. He was just planning to go on a trip to one of the cities, but now he has company, namely, a lovely American woman. Lucas can't relax on the bus because Ellie uses him as a pillow. Ellie is the younger sister of Charlie's colleague, and it was he who asked to take the girl on the trip. She is 23 years old and just graduated from college. He asked his friend to take care of his companion, and Lucas is very embarrassed by this. He is distracted from thoughts of unexpected difficulties by Ellie's insistent voice. She leans against the window, very excited that they have reached their destination. That destination is sunny Los Angeles. Their company attracts a lot of attention as the beautiful Ellie captures people's attention. But Ellie's attention is captured by Lucas, who, like her, finds himself in Los Angeles for the first time. Ellie is very excited and looking forward to new experiences. Lucas is surprised by the girl's easy attitude towards traveling alone with a man. He decides that it is because Ellie is American. It is also possible that because the girl is younger than him, she may consider Lucas to be something like an uncle. Noticing that Lucas was deep in thought, Ellie actively waves her hand in front of his face. She calls the man's name loudly, forcing him to listen to her. The man is embarrassed that he didn't hear a word and apologizes to an irritated Ellie. The American woman says that since Lucas has no travel plans, they will follow her schedule. Lucas agrees to everything Ellie has come up with for the trip, and Ellie has already thought out a whole program with visits to a bunch of attractions. For example, they visit the Warner Brothers film studio and take a lot of photos in different locations, and of course, they don't forget to head to the pier during sunset. After asking someone to take a photo of them, they pose together for a souvenir photo. After walking around for the day, Lucas and Ellie decide to have dinner at a restaurant. They order food and wine to go with it to celebrate their trip and raise their glasses in a toast. Ellie hopes that Lucas wasn't too embarrassed to take her along for company, and Lucas replies that he enjoyed spending time with the girl. He understands that he would not have been so active in exploring the sights alone. The young people discuss the purpose of Lucas's trip to America, and the man talks about his desire to expand his knowledge and get to know a new culture. Ellie says that she wanted to make good memories before starting work, which is why she planned the trip. The American studied hard and was able to find a job on Wall Street, and so she has one last chance to spend time carefree. Lucas is amazed that such a young girl has already managed to find a job on the world's main financial street. On the wave of such amazing discoveries, Lucas wants to drink another glass. He courts the American woman and gallantly fills her glass with wine. He wants Ellie to fulfill her goal of working with really big money and for himself to find and realize his dream. The girl listens attentively to her companion's wishes and smiles contentedly. They touch glasses, and Lucas expresses his desire to one day approach Ellie as an important financier on Wall Street. After dinner, they check into the hostel they are staying at and are surprised that there is no one else in the room. Ellie expresses the thought that it turns out that even in such places, there are not always people. She places her suitcase against the wall and slowly lowers herself onto her bed, after which she looks playfully at Lucas and expresses joy that they are alone. Lucas shudders at such blatant flirting and freezes in place. His gaze involuntarily slides over the girl's seductive body, but before his thoughts take him too far, he coughs in embarrassment and asks not to joke with him like that, even to diffuse the situation. After a while, they turn off the light and settle down on the bunk bed, after which Ellie wishes the man goodnight from the second tier. He politely wishes her goodnight, but he is still agitated. Ellie's flirting almost made his heart jump out of his chest. Being Asian, he was not used to such overt displays of interest, and so it was difficult for him to pretend to be calm. He can't deny that Ellie is a very beautiful girl, but she is the sister of Charlie's friend, and he doesn't want to cause him trouble, so he decides to just continue to treat Ellie like a travel companion. The next day, he takes her to relax at a bar with a pool. People in bathing suits relax both in the water and at the bar. Ellie, who comes to the bar, attracts many glances because of her beauty. However, she pays no attention to the people and hurries to approach Lucas, who is relaxing in a sun lounger. Lucas looks sheepishly at his companion, who comes up to him and takes off her towel. The girl remains in a swimsuit, which very favorably emphasizes the curves of her body. She leans closer to an embarrassed Lucas and suggests that they go swimming. The girl actively splashes in the water and easily swims across the pool. At this time, Lucas himself sits on the side and simply immerses his feet in the water. Even emerging from the pool, Ellie looks very impressive. She is pleased with the pleasant swim and happily approaches Lucas. Lucas tells her that he is not very good at swimming, so he prefers to just rinse his feet a little. Ellie immediately offers to teach Lucas to swim and pulls him into the water. Lucas tries to refuse and sweats from embarrassment. He understands that if Ellie continues to show him signs of attention, he will definitely become attracted to her, so he tries to keep his distance. Lucas still tries to politely refuse and says he wants to go back to the hotel. Suddenly, 3 guys come up from behind them and start rudely discussing Ellie's beauty out loud. One of the guys suggests that Ellie leave Lucas and play with them. Lucas looks at the guys with bewilderment as they try to hit on Ellie, who frowns at this. Suddenly, he notices that one of the 3 is not paying attention to Ellie. On the contrary, as soon as he catches Lucas's eye, he immediately winks at him. Lucas is horrified when he realizes that they are trying to hit on him too. The guys continue to actively invite Ellie to come with them to the bar. She refuses because she already has company, and the guys laugh at this. She tells the guys to leave quickly before she calls security, and this makes them aggressive. One of the guys tries to grab Ellie's hand by force. Dissatisfied with her threats, Lucas immediately rushes forward and intercepts his hand, preventing him from touching Ellie. He stands in front of Ellie and convinces the strangers that they cannot touch the girl without her consent. Ellie is impressed that Lucas behaved like a true gentleman. She is embarrassed by the feelings that overwhelm her at the sight of a man's broad back. Lucas at this time is worried about what to do next because even though he decided to protect the girl, he is not used to fighting. The guys throw words at each other with discontent and want to get into a conflict, although Lucas still tries to cover Ellie with his body. She carefully pushes him aside. She calmly and boldly walks forward toward the unfamiliar young people, crossing her arms over her chest. She orders them to apologize and leave. Then, they will pretend nothing happened. The guys don't understand why they should apologize if they didn't do anything wrong. Ellie is pleased with the answer, but the smile on her lips looks quite threatening. She immediately draws the attention of those who were pestering them to the man behind their backs. It turns out to be a local security guard. He reminds the guys that they have already been warned about harassing clients, which will result in them having to move out of the hotel. The security guard is joined by several more colleagues, and they quickly take the harasser away. On this occasion, Lucas and Ellie decide to have a cocktail at the bar. They are delighted with the bar and the taste of the drinks, which makes the bartender smile contentedly. They were given coupons for free drinks as compensation from the hotel. Lucas considers what happened a stroke of luck, and Ellie can't help but agree with him. The girl thoughtfully looks down into her glass of drink and turns to her companion. She is interested in learning more about Lucas and asks him to tell her about himself, his family, and his life in the past. Lucas thinks about the answer and says that his mother died early and he lived for a long time with his father, who loved gambling and ruined them, and then died. He tells the story of how he graduated from college, got a job at a company, and married a woman who worked in the next department. After hearing about Lucas and Maria's life, Ellie becomes furious. She calls Lucas's ex-wife a witch and loudly berates her for the pain she caused the man. Lucas didn't expect her to scold his ex, but unexpectedly this reaction turns out to be pleasant for him. But Ellie immediately notes that she understands why Maria wanted to marry him. She believes that Lucas listens carefully to the woman's words, respects her, and cares for her. So, based on these thoughts, Ellie is sure that it is easy to fall in love with him. Lucas feels embarrassed and a pleasant warmth in his chest from the girl's words. In order not to cross the line established between them, Lucas hurries to end the evening and suggests that they go to their rooms. He falls tiredly onto the bed, trying to recover from his time alone with Ellie. Lucas lies with his arms outstretched, thinking about everything that happened. He thinks that he should be more conscious because Ellie almost threw him off track. To distract himself, he decides to check the price of cryptocurrency and takes out his phone. He notes with displeasure that the prices of many cryptocurrencies have collapsed. He reflects on how great his losses would have been if he had not sold his assets. Suddenly, there is a knock at the door, and Lucas is very surprised to see Ellie on the other side. Lucas thinks something happened to her and rushes to open it. Ellie stands outside the hotel room door in a seductive nightgown. What he sees leaves Lucas speechless and unable to breathe for a few seconds. He nervously asks the girl what happened, since she came to him, but Ellie suddenly puts her finger on his lips, telling him to shut up. She enters the room and approaches Lucas closely, without any embarrassment. Ellie is seductive and beautiful, so she literally glows in Lucas's eyes. She persuades Lucas to spend the night in the same bed, and when they lie down next to each other, she decides to find out his opinion about the trip. This time they are in Las Vegas, and Lucas likes it much more than he imagined. He liked Santa, Monica Beach for its natural beauty, and Las Vegas for the splendor of the bustling city. Ellie chuckles at his words and shares Lucas's point of view. The girl suddenly sits up in bed to move closer to Lucas. She turns over onto her stomach and puts her hands under her head, asking the man if he is sure that it is enough for him to just talk at night. Lucas silently prays that he won't lose his temper, but replies that the night is fine and suitable for conversation. Ellie wonders why Lucas doesn't openly show his affection and desire. Lucas thinks that he wants to be honest with the American woman. He replies that he is not sure he is ready for the responsibility after being intimate with a woman. After his divorce from his wife, he lost interest in dating, but he knows for sure that he doesn't want the consequences if their meaning is only in short-term pleasure. He also gently notes that he doesn't particularly want to hurt Ellie. The girl blushes and feels her breath catch in her throat from his confession, but, to hide her embarrassment, she accuses Lucas of being rude. Hiding her face in the pillow, she asks the man to talk to her all night. Lucas does not object, and they begin to share impressions of their journey together. But in the end, Lucas falls asleep peacefully. During their conversation, Ellie looks at the sleeping Lucas and gently touches his face, after which she carefully rolls up to the man's side and hugs him. She feels a little disappointed, but even such a first night in the same bed makes Ellie feel happy. In the morning, they pack their things and head to their final destination, New York. Lucas decided to take Ellie to this city and, at the same time, see many famous places in New York. He plans to return to Seoul from this city, as it is faster than via San Francisco. Lucas asks the girl to take care of herself and wishes her luck in her life and work. Ellie rushes to him and presses herself to his chest, hugging him tightly. She thinks it was great traveling with Lucas and asks him to contact her when he gets home. Having promised the girl that he would definitely contact her later, Lucas boards his flight and heads home. Lucas sits on the plane and thinks about the fact that the long journey to America has finally come to an end. That when he came to the States, he met a lot of interesting and good people, from startup leaders to the charming Ellie. He was also very impressed by the industry and culture flourishing in every corner of the country, and of course the enormous capital. When Lucas sensed this huge economic flow, he became greedy and wanted to join it. He realizes that he wants to make more money because it's the most fun there is. When he lands in Seoul, he suddenly realizes that he is greeted at the airport by a familiar face. Dan arrived at the airport with a name sign and called Lucas to come to him. The man is surprised that his colleague came especially to meet him, and he's not the only one who came to meet Lucas. Sue approaches the men with a soft smile, happy to finally see Lucas after a while. Lucas is happy to see her, and Dan chuckles. Behind his back at his colleague's reactions, Lucas wonders how Sue was able to arrive during working hours, but the girl replies that she was nearby. The colleagues decide that after Lucas's trip, he will want to have a bite to eat, and the man agrees and takes them to a good restaurant. At this moment, Lucas's phone signals incoming messages from Maria, although he doesn't pay attention to it. After a good time with Dan and Sue, Lucas finally comes home. He reflects that American landscapes are good, but nothing compares to his homeland. Before unpacking his luggage, he decides to check the notifications on his phone. He is delighted to receive a message from Charlie, who invites him to come to America more often. He smiles at Ellie's message, in which she talks about a successful interview at a large American company. Ellie writes that they will see each other soon, and Lucas is puzzled about the reasons for the possible meeting. But then he notices the number of messages from his ex-wife, Maria. In her messages, Maria puts on a comedy act and presents herself as a tender, suffering wife. She writes how sad she is that he left for the States without telling her anything. She talks about how much she misses him, and that only after they broke up did she realize the strength of her love for Lucas. Lucas sweats in horror when he reads these messages, thinking that Maria has gone crazy. Subsequent messages contain information about gossip within the company, which talks about money Lucas lost on investments. The woman writes again and again, and when she doesn't receive a response, she begins to get irritated. In the end, she just bombards him with insults and threats. In her latest messages, Maria threatens that Lucas will have a hard time at work. This behavior impresses Lucas, but he immediately blocks all of his ex-wife's numbers on his phone so that she can no longer bombard him with messages. He once again admits that the divorce from Maria was one of the best events in his life. The next day, he comes to work with bags full of souvenirs for his colleagues and, in an elevated mood, is alarmed by the fact that the company's employees look extremely sad. He is trying to figure out what happened to the atmosphere when several people from his department approach him. They ask Lucas about his vacation experiences and share their own investment success, which they have enjoyed thanks to Lucas's advice. Then Lucas realizes that the reason for the decline in morale in the team is unsuccessful investments in cryptocurrency and large financial losses. Suddenly, from behind, someone mockingly calls out to Lucas, who has returned from vacation. Senior colleagues with whom he has good relations, namely the manager and the head of the department, come closer to say, "Hello." Lucas is very happy to see them both after so many days of his absence. He takes them to a meeting room to give them the souvenirs he brought, which are expensive watches. Taking the Rolex in their hands, the men look at it in shock, afraid to believe that what is happening is real. However, the man confirms that they are holding a branded item in their hands. Lucas thanks the men for their help and understanding during the last years of his work. That's why he wanted to give the manager and the head of the department memorable gifts. However, the manager suddenly frowned, his face darkened, and he sighed heavily. Lucas looks at this strange reaction to his gift with surprise. The men begin to make excuses that they cannot accept such an expensive and special gift. Lucas tries to reason with them, telling them not to worry about the price since it doesn't really matter to him. The department head, sweating, says that someone is gossiping around the office that Lucas has lost his assets. Lucas immediately denies this information, which surprises and pleases the men who note that this is not the first time the rumor has appeared. After receiving information about who the rumor monger might be, Lucas heads to the roof for a break. Almost immediately after, Jack, the colleague who let other employees down in the cryptocurrency story, rises up pretending to care about Lucas's fate. Jack tries to find out if he is doing well financially. Lucas smirks contentedly as he begins to lead the man into his trap. In the past, Jack had always bullied him and other employees with less experience, so Lucas had a good chance to get revenge. He decides to confirm the rumors Jack has spread to see what happens. Jack always looks down on everyone if they are inferior to him in any way, and for the sake of satisfying his pride, he is ready to harm other people. Lucas knew he would be angry when he found out about his success, but he didn't think it would be this bad. Jack explains his curiosity by his concern for Lucas and his future. He puts pressure on the man, inviting him to talk freely about his problems. Deciding to play along with him in order to fulfill his plan, Lucas decides to give Jack some information. Lucas replies that things are not going well for him, and he didn't want to tell anyone, but he can trust Jack. Jack immediately beams and begins to convince Lucas that he won't tell anyone anything. Then Lucas gives him information that he is broke and has less than 10 million won left in his account. Trying hard not to burst out laughing, Jack takes pity on Lucas and thanks him for sharing his problems with him. At this point, the trap that Lucas had set snaps shut, and although Jack promised not to tell anyone about Lucas's situation, he immediately goes around the office premises and starts new rumors. Because of his words, colleagues begin to gossip that Lucas sold his assets and went bankrupt. It's hard for Jack to keep his face straight. He's shaking all over with delight. People's disappointment in Lucas brings Jack unprecedented joy. He sees Lucas as nothing more than an annoying caterpillar and wants to trample him. Jack needs Lucas to remain one step below him for the rest of his life. Suddenly, the employees' chatter is interrupted by one of their colleagues. He announces that there will be a large corporate dinner party that evening. Jack snorts contemptuously, thinking that they will be offered cheap cuisine again, and he is above it. However, in reality, dinner will be at a restaurant famous for its Korean beef of the highest quality in all of Gangnam. Of course, such a promise arouses curiosity among employees. At the expensive restaurant they go to, they are greeted like important people. The company's employees are shocked and doubt that they can be and eat in a place like this. However, they decide quite quickly that since they were invited, they need to take advantage of the situation. Usually, you can only visit such a restaurant when meeting really rich people, which is why the dishes are more expensive than ordinary employees can afford. Jack wonders who might be the one who called the employees together for a corporate dinner. Suddenly, to his surprise, Lucas enters the restaurant accompanied by the manager and the head of the department. This irritates Jack because he sees it as bragging about his closeness to department heads. However, at that very moment, Lucas takes the microphone and announces to everyone that it was he who organized this event. This shocks all of the colleagues present, except those who were aware of Lucas's plan. Lucas explains that he has no special intentions and that this dinner is simply a way to spend time with colleagues. Since he couldn't bring many souvenirs, he decided to order a nice dinner for everyone. Lucas's colleagues are shocked by the high-quality meat that the waiters bring. Out. Jack realizes that the 10 million that should be in Lucas's account would not be enough for such a dinner. Everyone around starts whispering about the rumors that Jack was spreading, and in the end, the idea that Jack was spreading rumors on purpose still sounds at the table. In response to this, Jack begins to aggressively argue that Lucas himself told him about his losses. Suddenly, the head of the department speaks up and casually says that Lucas doesn't make mistakes. These words attract Jack's attention, who feels ashamed. The department head continues that he also lost a lot of money on cryptocurrency, but that was only because he did not listen to Lucas. He decided to trust Jack, who was confident in his words. Now he is spreading rumors about Lucas that are clearly false, and this irritates the man. Jack tries to think of something to justify himself, but words don't come to mind. Lucas slowly walks up to his desk and calls the man by name. The old man would not have paid attention to the gossip Jack was spreading. He simply had no choice but to accept it. But now everything has changed. With a satisfied grin, Lucas says that the evening has been prepared especially for Jack. This, of course, immediately causes Jack to fly into a rage when he realizes that he has fallen into a trap. Colleagues begin to discuss that Jack blabbed the secrets that Lucas entrusted to him, and after that, he sits there calmly. Jack feels shame and anger because he is trapped and cannot justify himself. Others laugh at his greed because he couldn't refuse expensive beef, so he came. Jack's gaze grows darker and darker, but he cannot utter a word. Lucas and his department exchange grins as they acknowledge their success. Suddenly, the head of the department's attention is drawn to someone who has come into the restaurant. He shudders in fear and breaks out in a sweat from excitement. Lucas, like all his colleagues, turns towards the door with excitement. The guest who comes to dinner turns out to be one of the bosses of their company. Lucas's colleagues stand up to greet their elder, but he chuckles lightly and asks to continue the dinner calmly. He dropped by for a minute to see Lucas specifically. Lucas is surprised by this turn of events and looks at his boss from under his brows. They sit down at the table, and Lucas places the meat on the grill for his boss. The man's colleagues are clearly uncomfortable being at dinner with someone from the boss, but Lucas acts calmly. Taking a bottle of soju, the boss congratulates Lucas on his investment success. Lucas traditionally offers a glass and receives a drink, after which he thanks his boss. The man laughs that if he had known about Lucas's talents, he would have created an investment department in the company. Although Lucas smiles at the director's face, in his heart, he still doesn't understand the reason for his arrival. Lucas knows that no matter how much publicity he gains from his investments, it's unlikely to attract the attention of the company's top brass. At this point, the suspicion is confirmed because the director immediately says that Lucas doesn't understand women. Unlike investments, the director considers the separation from Maria to be Lucas's stupidest mistake, and such a statement makes Lucas grit his teeth. Lucas could not appreciate the rarity of this woman since it was he who suggested a divorce and did not try to understand her. The director mocks that in fact it was Maria who was tired of living with him. However, thanks to Lucas's stupidity, the director was given the opportunity to become happier. Although Lucas guesses the reason for the happiness, he still decides to clarify what special thing he did for the director. It turns out that during Lucas's absence, Maria became close to the director of their company. He came to the restaurant to announce their relationship and convince Lucas to separate personal and work. He tries to praise himself by humiliating others, saying that not everyone can be with such a beauty as Maria. But Lucas interrupts him loudly and calmly congratulates the man. He picks up a bottle of soju and offers to fill his boss's glass. He says that he is happy for him and Maria as an ex-husband and wishes them long life. But in his thoughts, he already sympathizes with the future life of the boss. When dinner is over, Lucas goes outside to clear his head after an alcohol-fueled evening. He doesn't want to think about Maria, but he still remembers that he was once happy with her. They got together and started dating pretty quickly after some brief flirting, and after 6 months of dating, they had a traditional wedding. Lucas thinks he wanted a family so much that he tried to hold Maria's hand in his until the very end. But reality turned out to be harsh, and after the wedding, a huge difference in his and his wife's characters was revealed. Lucas faced constant neglect from his wife's family, and his married life was a living hell. So in the end, they divorced a year later by mutual consent. But Lucas just wanted to have a tasty dinner together and rejoice at the good news together. He wanted to feel the support of his wife during difficult times. He wanted to be a completely different parent than his father, and now, because of alcohol, he feels that he has become overly sentimental. At this time, Sue, running late, runs through the streets of Seoul to a restaurant for dinner. Each of them is lost in their own thoughts, and it seems that they are about to meet, but this does not happen. When Sue reaches the restaurant, it turns out that dinner is already over. On his way, Lucas meets a familiar face framed by blonde hair. Not far from him stands Ellie, smiling warmly at the man. Lucas brings Ellie home to warm her up because the winters in Korea are colder than she thought. Lucas is curious about what brought the American woman to Korea, but she thinks the answer is obvious. Of course, she came because she wanted to see Lucas. She was able to get the job she wanted, but she still had about 10 days before it started, and she decided to spend them in Seoul. She asks to stay with Lucas, who is embarrassed by the fact that he only has one bed in his house, but Ellie laughs that they are both already accustomed to such conditions. Lucas is confused and excited about their meeting. He did not expect to see Ellie so soon. The girl shifts awkwardly from foot to foot, fearing rejection. Sighing, Lucas agrees to let her stay with him and suggests taking a bath to warm up. Ellie, the girl, obeys and goes to the bathroom, where she enjoys spending time in the water. At this time, Lucas decides to cook something hot for dinner. He washes and peels vegetables, thinking about what he can make from Korean home cooking. He hadn't cooked for anyone for a long time, but he hadn't lost the memory of how to do it. Lucas decides to cook bulgogi for Ellie, a traditional dish made from sliced meat and vegetables. At one time, Maria despised him for this dish, considering it beneath her dignity. And although Lucas was confident in the taste of his cooking, his ex-wife didn't care. After putting the food on the stove, Lucas begins to have some unpleasant flashbacks. Everything he cooked for his wife, she threw away with disgust and poured into the sink. She wanted to eat in rich restaurants, and Lucas could not offer her this, which made him feel hopeless. Now, for the first time in a long time, he is setting the table for dinner with a woman, not letting the man get deeper into his thoughts. Ellie hurriedly enters the kitchen, dressed in a robe. She dries her hair and praises the aroma of the prepared dishes. The girl sits down at the table, assuring that she will gladly eat everything that Lucas has prepared for her. The man becomes a little nervous as Ellie cautiously tries the food. She puts a spoonful of meat and rice into her mouth and freezes for a moment. Lucas looks at Ellie almost without blinking, trying to read her reaction, but Ellie is delighted. She loudly praises Lucas's culinary talents and even blushes with pleasure. She realizes that he served her bulgogi because she had something similar at a Korean restaurant in the States, but she likes Lucas's better. Her reaction, frank and pleased, makes the man's heart beat faster, and a smile appears on his face. After a hearty dinner, the two of them wash the dishes and tidy up the kitchen. Afterwards, they change for bed and head to the bedroom, where they awkwardly shuffle around the bed. Finally, they lie down face to face, and Ellie, exhausted from the journey, falls asleep almost immediately. But Lucas can't sleep. He looks at the girl tenderly and thinks about Ellie's feelings for him. He is afraid to start a complicated relationship, but he can't help but notice that she is in love with him. His hand involuntarily reaches for her light hair, and he tucks a strand of hair behind the girl's ear. His fear of letting Ellie get closer is due to the fact that he is afraid that the girl will hurt him if he opens his heart. He thought he was doing well, but the scars from the divorce were deeper than he imagined. Yet meeting her made him doubt that solitude was the right path. The girl, half asleep, moves closer and presses herself against Lucas. He can't help but gently touch Ellie's forehead with his lips. Too immersed in his thoughts about feelings, Ellie's eyes open almost immediately from the touch, and they look at each other, embarrassed. The tension between Ellie and Lucas is sparkling, and the girl gently touches his chest, not wanting to push away the one who looks at him with such Warmth. Lucas pulls Ellie closer and presses his lips to hers. He can no longer resist Ellie's charm, and they spend the night together. In the morning, the story takes us to the office and production facilities of a medical company with which Lucas's firm cooperates. The company's director speaks on the phone with partners and learns, with horror, about several broken contracts. It turns out that several contractors have refused to work with this company in the last month. At this moment, the telephone rings loudly, and the CEO grabs the receiver. He is surprised to recognize Lucas's voice on the other end of the line. After a short conversation, they agree to meet, and Lucas arrives at the office. He saw the director of this pharmaceutical company when he was still a newbie 3 years ago. The director regrets that he did not receive Lucas properly since the meeting was arranged very quickly. Lucas asks not to apologize because it was he who asked for a meeting without prior arrangement. The men wonder who Ellie is, who accompanies Lucas, and he explains that she works with him. In the eyes of the pharmaceutical company's employees, this is a very interesting fact. They are curious about the reason for Lucas's arrival, and he, a little worried, decides to ask a question. He asks if the director has had any difficulties running the company recently. The director confirms this, but notes that Lucas's company still gives them a lot of good orders and there are many important projects ahead. However, Lucas shares information that another pharmaceutical company is putting pressure on this one. This level of knowledge of internal corporate matters stuns the men present at the meeting. Lucas goes on to explain that due to expansion, the company is experiencing a lack of capital, and their competitors are putting pressure on their partners, forcing them to terminate contracts. The men understand that the ultimate goal of competitors is to acquire a weaker company at a low price. Lucas is quick to reassure the men, saying that he is attending the meeting as a private individual and not as a representative of his company. He finally declares that he would like to invest his personal funds in the company of the director, sitting in front of him. The director of the pharmaceutical company is very surprised that Lucas is involved in investments. From the very beginning, he was interested in the purpose for which his old acquaintance had come, but despite the fact that he needs money to support the company, he refuses Lucas's offer. He is not confident that the company will stay afloat for more than 3 months, and there is a chance that Lucas will not be able to recoup his investment. He suggests that the thousands or millions that Lucas allocated be used for something else. Lucas only sighs heavily in response to his words. Once again, he is being underestimated. He pauses for a moment, choosing his words carefully because he wants to maintain the intrigue. The men in the company perceive this silence as a negative reaction, but Lucas suddenly asks about the amount of money that will help the company get out of the crisis. The company director does not expect this. He is still not used to seeing Lucas as more than just a newcomer. Then the man stuns him with the news that he was thinking about investing billions. Since Lucas considers the director to be an excellent businessman and respects his drug company, he wants to support it financially. He invites the men to review the total amount of assets in his account and name any amount they need. The company representatives are speechless from shock and can only look at Lucas's phone. They understand the seriousness of Lucas's intentions, who is ready to invest any amount in the company. After this, it is simply impossible to refuse him, and the men prepare the necessary package of documents. Ellie immediately takes up their research, noting that Lucas has chosen a good target for investment. Despite the difficult situation due to construction and loans, the company has high productivity and many clients with long-term contracts. Therefore, by solving the company's current problems, there is a chance that income will increase significantly. The director, listening to Ellie and Lucas's conversation, which they were conducting in English, once again tries to find out what the girl does. Then Lucas fully introduces her as a financial expert working in a large American company. This gives an understanding that he was serious from the very beginning. The director finds it hard to believe how the man became such a successful investor in 3 years. They seal the deal and shake hands contentedly. As an additional gift, the company director offers him a business card from a representative of a bio company, which can also be invested in. After a business meeting, Lucas and Ellie drive around town in his Ferrari. The girl thanks Lucas for the fact that her first job was to evaluate an investment worth 40 billion won, and it was a useful experience. But she immediately begins to laugh at her companion, asking about payment for her work. Lucas asks what Ellie would like to receive as a reward for her efforts. The girl suddenly smiles slightly and says that she has an idea. There is something she has long dreamed of doing with Lucas. So very soon, Lucas finds himself handcuffed to a chair in some basement, blushing with delight. Ellie suggests that they have some fun together. It turns out that the girl brought Lucas to a quest room that she read about on the internet. She tries to find out if he found the prison escape game funny, and Lucas replies that he didn't mind, but was confused by the handcuffs. Suddenly, Ellie sighs that she regrets working so far away from Lucas, in another country. She would like to see him every day. Beginning to develop feelings for the American woman, Lucas, for the first time, thinks about buying the company where she works. However, at present, he does not have the money needed for this. However, opening a business in Seoul's commercial district can change everything. While he is thinking, Ellie's attention is drawn to some establishment. It is a center where you can watch movies together and which couples use for dates. Although Lucas is not eager to go to such a place, Ellie is very impressed and wants to spend time with the man. When they get inside, she is very excited about her idea. The American woman's beauty immediately captivates the center's employee, but when he sees a girl of this level with an ordinary-looking Korean, his mood changes. He looks at Lucas almost menacingly, despising him for his success. The center's employee believes that he looks no worse than Lucas, and that this situation is unfair. Meanwhile, Lucas and Ellie choose a movie, and the employee automatically assigns them a room, responding in a friendly manner. Then he mentally reproaches himself because he doesn't want to be nice to this couple. Ellie wants to watch the movie that interests her as soon as possible, and Lucas supports the girl. An employee of the center comes up with a cunning plan. He decides to wash the floor in front of their room. Then if he hears any indecent sounds from the room, he can break in. In this way, he will ruin Lucas and Ellie's date and get moral satisfaction. But after half an hour, the floor is polished to a shine like never before. But the obscene sounds are still not heard. Only the film can be heard from the room. The man looks awkwardly at the door, not understanding how Lucas can just watch a movie alone with such a girl. Lucas and Ellie are sitting on a special bed, hugging each other. But their attention is really focused on the movie. The film is dedicated to the epidemic that took many lives. The film leaves a heavy impression, and Ellie involuntarily asks the question of how they could live during an epidemic. Lucas replies that there will be numerous casualties, and the economy will completely collapse. However, according to Lucas, everything in the film is too exaggerated. After all, there are people who do not lose hope in any situation, and they will be able to unite and defeat the disease. The girl looks at her companion with a satisfied smile. She admits, a little sheepishly, that she is impressed by his cool speech. Later that night, while Lucas and Ellie are sleeping in his apartment, the man hears Ellie breathing heavily. Turning the girl over onto her back, he wakes her up and watches in horror as blood flows from her mouth. Then he grabs Ellie, throws her on his back, and hurries out into the street to catch a car to the hospital. However, as soon as they step outside the apartment complex, Lucas's eyes widen in horror. The streets are a mess, bodies everywhere, burning, cars and the sound of sirens. Lucas doesn't understand how the world has changed so much in just a few hours. The dead under their feet is what especially frightens the man. He tries to bring his human burden to its senses. Suddenly, Ellie, who is barely breathing, speaks up and whispers something. As Lucas listens, Ellie begins to scream that everything happened because of him and transforms into a zombie. Lucas opens his eyes in a cold sweat and realizes with relief that he was just having a nightmare. He sits up in bed and looks with concern at Ellie sleeping next to him. Fortunately, she looks completely healthy and dreams peacefully. Jumping out of bed, Lucas goes to his desk and takes out a business card he received recently. He recalls the director of a pharmaceutical company saying that he had invested money in it himself before. The bio company he told Lucas about is conducting research into analyzing flu strains and creating more effective vaccines using artificial intelligence. Feeling the need to do a good deed after a disturbing dream, Lucas calls the number on the business card. A few hours later, he takes Ellie to the airport, and she says goodbye with a little sadness. Lucas gently hugs the girl and promises to contact her when he is in the States. He is sad to see off Ellie, who caused such a storm of feelings in him, but suddenly he feels his phone vibrating in his trouser pocket. He picks up the phone and is surprised to find his friend Charlie on the other end of the line. Charlie laughs at the fact that Lucas was so scared by the nightmare that he immediately decided to invest in medicine. Lucas is confused by this reaction, so he replies that he only made an appointment to discuss such investments. Charlie believes that it will not be easy to succeed in developing a vaccine using artificial intelligence. Lucas listens attentively to his friend's words about how the development of artificial intelligence can increase the success of the project. However, even if a drug is created, it will only enter a competitive market in 8 to 15 years. Therefore, the profitability is too low compared to the required investment. Lucas muses that perhaps there really is no point in investing in an area that has no potential. However, the dream and the threat it contained disturbed the man too much. Charlie thinks Lucas should listen to the experts. He decides to introduce his friend to someone who is directly related to medical research. To Lucas's surprise, the expert he is speaking to via video call answers the call from the gym during exercise. Paul is a professor of infectious diseases at the American University Hospital. Lucas is a little embarrassed by such an interesting person, but he is also glad to meet him. Paul decides to find out why Lucas needed his consultation. The Korean replies that he is interested in developing vaccines using artificial intelligence. Paul notes that this is a very interesting and relevant question for scientists. In fact, artificial intelligence is already being used in medicine and drug development and genetic analysis. The performance is still insufficient, but large companies are interested in the rapid success of this technology. Lucas is surprised that artificial intelligence is already being used and that there are strong competitors in the market. The situation turns out to be more complicated than Lucas imagined. Paul, after listening to Lucas's story, suddenly remembers a friend. He also believes that artificial intelligence should be used to develop vaccines, and he is also Korean. And by putting these two thoughts together, Lucas forms a conclusion. He asks if this is the doctor he already contacted, Paul says, and it turns out that Paul was telling him about the research company this doctor works for. Lucas is surprised by this coincidence because he learns that Paul and a doctor named Henry were friends when they studied together, and Paul considers Henry a real genius who can change the world. It would have been more profitable for such a genius to receive support and conduct research in the States, but he went back to Korea. It turns out that in the past, he hit a professor who made disparaging remarks about the purpose of Henry's research. After this, he left the university, saying that he would rather conduct research alone. Lucas is scared because he immediately imagines that things will be tough for him too. Once Henry finds out that he has changed his mind about investing, he will immediately hit Lucas himself. Paul is very eager to join Lucas in Henry's meeting, so he immediately volunteers to come to Seoul. And the very next day, they meet at the research center where Dr. Henry works. The American is taller than Lucas and broader in the shoulders, but he is quite a nice person. But the CEO of the bio company Lucas wants to invest in looks very weak and exhausted. Paul and Henry greet each other joyfully after a long separation. Lucas breathes a sigh of relief because Henry doesn't look threatening. But just as Lucas decides to discuss investments with him, the doctor begins to cough up blood. As a result, its splashes cover the men standing in front of him. Paul sympathetically holds his coughing friend, patting him on the back. Lucas looks at this picture with an awkward smile and still thinks that maybe he should invest in something else. Having drunk energy drinks and come to his senses, Henry introduces himself to Lucas once again and apologizes for the inconvenience. Paul laughs at him, saying that the reason for his troubles is the lack of training. Lucas still decides to find out if everything is okay with the doctor's health. It turns out that he simply didn't sleep for 5 days to prepare for the meeting. Lucas suggests rescheduling the meeting for another day so the doctor can rest. But he suddenly squeezes the jar in his hand. Splashes cover Lucas's face, and he tries to keep a polite smile on his lips. Henry immediately becomes gloomy and says that there should be no transfers. Even at this point, valuable time is running out, since it is impossible to predict where and when the virus will break out. He screams that it will be too late then, and coughs again, spraying everyone with his blood. Lucas seems to be able to get used to this by now. He and Paul don't even twitch an eyebrow. Henry grabs the remote control to show the guests a presentation about the importance of his project. He wipes the blood from his face and tries to gather all his strength. Flu, according to the doctor, looks like the same virus as a cold, but there are still significant differences between them. The common cold is caused by several viruses and has mild symptoms, while influenza is caused by one influenza virus and kills up to 1 million people each year. Lucas is stunned by these statistics. He had no idea that the consequences of the flu could be so serious. Flu is constantly mutating. History has already seen strains of bird flu, swine flu, and Spanish flu, the latter of which at one time took the lives of 40 million people. And since the population density of cities is now much higher, the danger is also greater. Now, an outbreak of such flu could turn into an unprecedented pandemic. Dr. Henry is doing his utmost to prevent such a development. Current flu vaccines will be useless if the flu mutates. Something new will have to be created. That's why Henry's research is aimed at reducing the speed of the new strain and creating a vaccine using artificial intelligence. The doctor gives Lucas and Paul papers with the results of his research. Professor Paul reads the documents especially actively, but does not stop his physical exercises for a second. The man is delighted that Henry continued to work on his project even after leaving the States. Henry says he doesn't have the most financial support in Korea, but it's enough to continue his research. Paul is so excited with delight that his clothes are torn from enthusiasm. Lucas seemed tired of being surprised by anything to do with these two men. Paul exclaims that Henry has done excellent research despite the lack of support, and he would be happy to invest in it. He rushes towards his university friend and hugs him with all his might, causing Henry to wheeze. Lucas immediately takes the professor's words personally. He wants to know if this project has a good chance of success. In response, the professor laughs loudly and shakes his head. This reaction shocks both Lucas and Dr. Henry. Paul then clarifies that this research seems like a worthwhile project for him as a scientist, but it is difficult to talk about third-party investors and their possible profits. However, it is impossible to predict how long it will take to develop. And it is also important to remember that the value of the research will depend on the new mutated virus. Of course, it will be possible to earn big money later. But for now, it requires too risky an investment of a huge amount of money and time. So Lucas is faced with a very difficult choice. If you just look at the potential profit, it would be wiser for him to refuse investments. But Lucas wants to help develop medicine. Seeing that the potential investor is deep in thought, Henry decides to propose a risky idea. If he does not achieve any significant results within 5 years, he will hand over all the results of his research to Lucas and resign. Both Paul and Lucas are shocked that Henry would do such a thing. However, the doctor thus shows his determination. Besides, if his company does not succeed within 5 years, all the research will be worthless. He is so determined that he is ready to burn everything he has in an attempt to achieve his goal. Lucas inquires about the company's required investment, and it turns out that it requires about $2 billion annually, but the more the better. Lucas, after listening to him, declares that since the doctor is so serious, he is ready to provide him with reliable support. He names his price at 10 billion won per year, meaning he is willing to provide a total investment of 50 billion won. Lucas is still not sure if he is doing the right thing, but Henry's passion for his work makes it worth it. So he comes closer to the doctor and extends his hand to shake his, wishing him further success. Henry, relieved, lets blood out of his mouth again and promises to do his best. And then he faints. And once again, covered in blood, Lucas only sighs. But he is very interested to know what will happen in the next 5 years and what will happen to his investment.
Meanwhile, in the building of the company where Lucas works, Sue is in a hurry to start her working day. She walks into her office and greets her colleagues in a friendly manner. One of the colleagues says hello back, and Sue asks him if Lucas
is here. Looking around, the guy says in confusion that he was here just recently. Assuming that Lucas might have gone to the roof, Sue decides to go after him. She is very happy that she will be able to see her senior colleague, and so she hurries up the stairs to the roof. She notices through the half-open door that Lucas is talking to his manager, but as she reaches for the door handle to approach, Sue hears snatches of conversation. She doesn't want to believe what she heard and freezes, afraid to breathe. Lucas hands the manager another letter of resignation, and this time it is definitely for dismissal. The girl freezes in the corridor. She simultaneously wants to intervene and is afraid to approach. Like all people, Lucas dreamed of being an unemployed man with a lot of money. People have very different dreams, but he considers this one to be the most sincere. He will no longer have to go through hell on public transport. He will no longer have to suffer because of overtime work. You won't have to please an unpleasant boss because that's how it's done. Now Lucas has complete economic freedom. And even if he doesn't work, money works for him. Lucas was finally ready to become unemployed with a huge amount of money. On Lucas's last day at work, his manager says that he has always been a diligent and hard worker. He hopes that the man will be able to achieve success outside the company. Lucas sincerely thanks his colleagues for the time he spent in the company, which gave him a lot. When asked about his future plans, he decides to say that he is thinking of simply continuing down the path of investing. The manager shakes Lucas's hand and tells him to invite him for a drink if he's around. He also whispers to Lucas that he has become the controlling shareholder of a pharmaceutical company. Although Lucas didn't make much of a secret of it, he was nonetheless surprised that the manager knew about it. A young colleague sees off his friend in tears as he is very sad to say goodbye. He pounces on Lucas with hugs, and he feels uncomfortable with such a display of emotion. However, he immediately whispers to Lucas to give him a hint next time about what is best to invest in. The guy wants to follow Lucas's path, make a fortune, and quit. The manager who hears this immediately starts teasing the employee. He notes that there is nothing wrong with wanting to get rich. Therefore, if he wants, he can immediately write a letter of resignation, and the manager will sign it. In tears, the boy takes back his words and whines that he will work harder. The manager asks Lucas if he plans to go into other departments as well, and Lucas has a great plan for that. He has someone to say goodbye to, so he goes up to the department where Maria works. The woman immediately begins to mock the fact that her ex-husband decided to quit his job. She wishes the man a happy, modest life, because once poor, always poor inside. Lucas is surprised by such a statement and asks Maria to explain her words. She replies that even though Lucas managed to get rich thanks to cryptocurrency, his essence as a beggar will not change. She had already noticed this once and was disappointed in him. So Maria is interested in when others will notice this trait. She's furious that Lucas doesn't respond to her teasing. He smiles absolutely calmly and does not look crushed at all. This makes Maria frown even more. She wants to see Lucas as nothing more than a pathetic insect. But the man says that he really got rich thanks to luck, bought an apartment, a car, and is very happy. And all this luck came to him only because they divorced in time. The woman is furious and can't believe that her once beaten husband would speak in such a way. But Lucas calmly turns his back on her and leaves, adding that he has marked her numbers as spam so that she can never contact him again. He doesn't pay attention to the screams and curses of his ex, but the fact that he didn't say goodbye to Sue upsets Lucas. Lucas is not blind and has long guessed about the girl's feelings. He is grateful to her for finding something in him even when he was a poor man with low self-esteem. But now that he has Ellie, Lucas can't accept Sue's feelings, so he wanted to say goodbye to her carefully. But maybe it will be better if she just forgets him over time. At this time, Sue is hiding from Lucas in the same office, afraid to catch the man's eye. Dan approaches Sue and says that she may still have time to confess to Lucas. He assures that a girl will not be able to achieve more if she is afraid to even come up and say hello. However, Sue, feeling her heart breaking, says that if Lucas is happy, then she will be happy too. At this time, Lucas is going down the elevator, running through many thoughts in his head. So much has happened to him lately that he can't remember it all. Despite the fact that his father exploited him all his life, it was he who somehow miraculously gave Lucas the first $25 billion. Lucas thought that after the divorce, he would not be able to have a relationship at all. But Ellie and other people who showed sympathy for him appeared in his life. And although the man was a little sad to leave the company where he enjoyed working, he had a great future ahead of him. Lucas takes a step towards this future and leaves the company he has worked for the past 3 years. He is inspired and looking forward to new adventures. And soon, unfortunately, life all over the world is faced with a great tragedy. Field hospitals are being set up everywhere, and the world is being engulfed in a global pandemic of a new virus unknown to science. After some time, we find ourselves again on the investment bulletin board. Participants in investment chats actively discuss where to invest money in cryptocurrency, stocks, or real estate. However, here comes a participant who previously actively promoted his own under the nickname 10,000,001. It turns out to be Jack, who bullied Lucas at work. Now the man is his devoted fan and has repented of everything. The chat participants agree that Lucas's life should now be a fairy tale, and they are not far from the truth. He moved to a new house, even more luxurious than the previous one. So much so that Lucas now has a security staff of many armed men and a personal swimming pool, and the man's popularity became the reason that a journalist came to visit him for an interview. After receiving praise for his new home, Lucas happily replies that he bought it for when he stops over in Korea. This is a great indication that Lucas has entered the top 10 richest people in Korea, and this despite the fact that he is only 32 years old, which is quite a young age for all his achievements. The man stands confidently in front of the camera, dressed in an expensive suit, and smiles softly. He has already settled into a luxurious environment. He is used to expensive cars and traveling. Now, even being on the covers of magazines doesn't surprise him much, but he still wants to show off the published magazine to Ellie. Lucas texts her that he will be coming to the States soon and wants to see her. However, the man does not receive an answer, and this makes him worry. This causes Alice, the new secretary and security guard, to call his name several times to get his attention. Lucas apologizes for his inattention, and this time listens seriously to her report on the growth of assets and the profit received. This leads to Lucas soon becoming one of the richest people in the world. Lucas feels satiated and uninspired. He wants something new and groundbreaking. Just in time, Alice tells him that there is a message from Dr. Henry. In it, the man reports that signs of an impending pandemic of a dangerous virus have appeared. Although the place of origin is difficult to determine, the infection has spread to many countries. Lucas regrets that an epidemic might happen, even though he is invested in the healthcare sector. That's why the man decides to help solve Henry's problems and build additional housing for his employees. Although they rented a large bus to transport the lab staff, Lucas believes that such measures are not enough. That's why he suggests acting more radically and improving their lives, since they have the opportunity. After all, these are people who work even at night, and it is inconvenient for them to live far from the laboratory. So Lucas decides that it would be in his best interest to build a new building. To implement his idea, he turns to an old friend, Chloe, whom he met on the plane. For a business meeting, they head to a classic soul bar. The girl is angry with Lucas because he asked for a meeting about work. He wants one of her company's divisions to help with the construction work. While Chloe herself hoped that the man she met 2 years ago would ask her out on a date, Lucas says he couldn't get in touch with the girl because he was always busy with investing or traveling. Chloe is surprised that Lucas now has a personal bodyguard, a large black man. Lucas explains that he hired him while traveling so that he wouldn't get stabbed for €100. The girl sighs but agrees to take on the construction, but she has conditions, and one of them is the shares of Chris's company, which Lucas bought. Still, Chloe's car company is showing great interest in autonomous driving. Lucas agrees to these conditions quite calmly, not seeing too much damage to himself, but Chloe's second condition evokes much more emotion in him. The embarrassed girl hides her face, as if she is afraid to say what is on her mind. But having made up her mind, she says that she wants to get really drunk with Lucas. At this time, an important conversation takes place in the company owned by her father. The chairman's secretary informs him that Chloe, despite it being late in the evening, still has not returned home. Chloe's father is not surprised by her absence, because he himself is a workaholic. However, the secretary reports that the girl is on a date with a man. This makes Chloe's father furious because he cannot imagine what kind of man would be worthy of his daughter. But his daughter spends her time very actively and drinks bottle after bottle with Lucas. She persuades Lucas to drink more, but the man knows when to stop. Lucas watches this behavior, sweating nervously. He didn't expect this from a rich heiress. He hands Chloe over to her staff, who promise to take Chloe home. At this time, he himself gets into his car and leaves the meeting place. As soon as Lucas is away, Chloe instantly comes to her senses, as if she had not been drinking at all. It turns out that she learned from YouTube that if you pretend to be drunk, a man will immediately attack you, and she decided to use this. However, she decides that he was embarrassed by her beauty, and there is no need to rush. Chloe confidently declares that there is no man who would not fall in love with her. At the company office, the girl's father is waiting impatiently for her, and a negative aura is gathering around the man. Chloe asks her father not to make a mountain out of a molehill, insisting that the meeting was business. First of all, Chloe wanted to buy out Lucas's shares in one of his American companies. The father is pleased that Chloe saw the meeting as business rather than romance. However, she openly admits that she has been in love with Lucas for a long time, which shocks the chairman. Chloe doesn't care that Lucas is divorced because she doesn't see anything special about couples dating and breaking up, and she doesn't intend to listen to any of her father's complaints about her beloved's candidacy. Her father whines that he introduced Chloe to nice boys, but she rejected them all, and Chloe replies that they were useless heirs to conglomerates. Chloe prefers to listen to her intuition, and it tells her that Lucas is a special person. She is confident that Lucas will be able to bring a real wind of change. The next day, Lucas goes to the bio company and meets Paul, who throws himself at him with a hug. Suddenly, Professor Paul is met with the sharp gaze of Lucas's security guard. Lucas's guard gets an equally appraising look at Professor Paul. As a result, a spark flies between the pumped-up men, and they begin to measure their muscles and agree to go to the gym together. Hung with the remains of clothes that the men had torn off and show off, Lucas sighs softly. Lucas asks the professor about Dr. Henry's health and learns that he worked all night and passed out. The current situation with the pandemic is, according to the professor, very bad. In just a month after the outbreak, the virus has spread to the United States, Europe, China, Japan, and the number of new infections has exceeded 25,000 per day, with a huge number of deaths. Paul asks Lucas for more computer power to run the artificial intelligence. This increase in capacity could help find a solution to both the virus and the necessary vaccine more quickly. At home, Lucas ponders the results of his visit to the bio company and his possible steps. He sighs heavily, trying to figure out how to increase the power for the artificial intelligence to work. One of Lucas's ideas is to build a building to house a computer center, and he is also thinking about using foreign cloud services. But he is not confident in the success of these ideas, so he decides to distract himself with computer games. Realizing how much dust has accumulated on his computer from not using it, he comes up with a new plan. To see if it will work, Lucas needs to hear his friend's opinion. He jumps up from his seat out of impatience because it is impossible to sit still. If his idea works, it will not only lead to huge computer performance, but also to a new business. At this time, the phone on the guard Lucas's bedside table begins to vibrate. A man wakes up and hurriedly answers a call from his boss, who asks him to prepare an urgent trip to the States. At this time, a fierce shootout is taking place in San Francisco. Of course, not in real life, but in another game that Charlie plays. Suddenly, a large black man appears in front of Charlie's face. Lucas's security guard scares his friend. Charlie jumps up and starts threatening to call the police, and then he realizes that he is surrounded by a lot of strangers. Suddenly, a familiar voice comes from behind the men. Lucas apologizes to his friend for the intrusion because they rang and knocked. But Charlie didn't hear, and they had to come in. Once the misunderstanding is cleared up, Charlie admires Lucas's personal bodyguards. But not wanting to drag it out for long, Lucas decides to ask his friend how he feels about superhero cartoons. Because Lucas has a desire to save the world together and become some kind of heroes. Right now, the world is in great danger, and men have a plan to save it. Charlie doesn't understand what the coin his friend is twirling in his fingers has to do with it. Lucas proposes to create our own cryptocurrency to solve pressing problems. He laughs when a friend suggests he seek treatment for his digital addiction. In fact, his idea has great potential for implementation. Lucas explains his plan to Charlie, who doesn't understand the logic. The creation of cryptocurrency is necessary for the development of a vaccine, since the performance of artificial intelligence is insufficient. Using blockchain technology, the system resources of computers that have applied for mining will be used, and in return, people will receive a new cryptocurrency. Using unused capacities of artificial intelligence could be a great help in developing a vaccine against the new virus. Lucas also guarantees a minimum exchange price for coins, which will allow people to offset their electricity bill and earn a little money. Charlie doubts that such an idea can bring profit, but it can definitely save the world. He is very impressed with Lucas's plan, and he wants to have fun by taking part in it. Lucas also plans to try his hand in the entertainment content niche. He is thinking about making a movie or drama with their favorite actors. Charlie is delighted and asks to trust him with the work, because he will not let you down and will complete all the tasks assigned to him. They decide to first assemble a team that will help them in implementing the project to create a cryptocurrency. Since they plan to pay them the best salary in the industry, Lucas asks his friend to choose people more carefully. However, Charlie teaches him that real heroes are not driven by money. They act on the call of their hearts. He posts an announcement about creating a team on a forum where the strongest representatives of the computer industry gather and offer to fulfill any wishes in terms of merch. The feedback starts pouring in like crazy, and Lucas is shocked at how interested everyone is in his project. Charlie laughs that this is the power of otaku, and he is not surprised that people are interested in the project. After some time, Lucas and Charlie open an office where the IT specialists they hired can work. Lucas meets a new employee at the entrance, who looks at him with interest and introduces himself to her. The girl awkwardly remains silent, actively looking at and blowing a bubble of gum, and then he writes in a general chat with colleagues that their boss is a hottie and they need to be careful. This behavior confuses Lucas, but he is not irritated, because he begins to get used to the manners of such extraordinary individuals. He decides for himself that all programmers have their own quirks, but this is not at all bad. Even though he and Charlie have set up brand new computers and workstations, no one uses them. Everyone sits wherever they feel comfortable with their laptops. Lucas approaches Charlie to get an interim report. Things are going well, and Charlie is devoting a lot of time to their project, taking time away from his work. But there is one person Charlie wants to introduce to his friend. This genius programmer's name is Eddie, and he sits separately from everyone else. He makes no mistakes when writing code and always puts his heart into his work. That's why Charlie confidently considers him the heart of their entire project. And he would like Lucas and Eddie to find common ground. But Charlie is also curious about the name Lucas came up with for their new coin. Lucas names their creation the Origin coin, which surprises his friend. But in a man's understanding, the source coin is a coin that can become the source of anything. While Lucas was in the States developing his cryptocurrency, the situation in his last campaign was tense. During breaks, the female employees actively discussed the appointment of Maria, Lucas's ex-wife, as head of the department, bypassing the candidate everyone liked. This is definitely personnel corruption. Since Maria is in a relationship with a senior manager whom she chose to undermine Lucas, Maria's subordinates doubt that she will make a good department head, since her experience and skills are insufficient. Maria witnesses their conversation and harshly scolds the girls for gossiping during the workday. In her opinion, if any of them are not satisfied with working under her leadership, they can submit a resignation letter or follow the previous head of the department to a city far from Seoul. The girls hastily apologize to Maria and rush to leave the break room. Lucas's ex-wife repeats her new title out loud. She is pleased with the power it gives her over people. Here, the woman's attention is drawn to a magazine with Lucas on the cover, lying on the table. She grabs it in irritation and throws it into the nearest trash can. As she walks down the company hallway, she reflects on the opportunity she lost when she lost Lucas. Now her new admirer has an annual salary of about 100 million won, and his parents have a nice house. And since he is a millionaire, a bright streak is simply bound to begin in her life. Once again cursing her ex-husband, she swears that she will live a happier life than he did. Her swearing and mention of Lucas's name attracts the attention of a passing girl. It turns out to be Sue, who has changed her appearance but has not forgotten her lover. At this time, in the office of Lucas's American company, employees are working very actively. A camera crew from the entertainment company the man created watches Lucas play. They film a story about their creator, but Lucas keeps losing it. However, the production team believes that this makes Lucas more human. Lucas sweats uncomfortably from the intense attention captured on film. He doesn't understand how he signed up for the filming of this video, which has been going on for several days now. The entertainment company he created is not yet making much profit. The appointed director complains that they have no content at all. Although Lucas gathered outstanding talent, created good conditions, and allocated huge funds, however, so far there are no interesting ideas or good results. The staff try to reason with him, noting that the worsening coronavirus problem is making filming difficult. But the director doesn't want to hear reasonable arguments, he wants to do something cool. Then one of the agency employees, the youngest one, takes the floor. She is cynical, makes fun of her boss when he picks on her, and she also has a good idea. This girl is a screenwriter, and she suggests making a documentary about Lucas. She is confident that such content can be popular with viewers. Their company doesn't have a flagship product yet, but its CEO is already quite popular. His story is full of provocative material, from divorce to sudden wealth. That's why the company decides to use its own director, Lucas, to promote the company. And now they are breaking into the man's private life, including filming him at his worst. The CEO periodically runs away from excessive attention. However, Lucas started this business himself, so he understands the possible benefits. Lucas is pleased with the way the company is developing. Even the number of employees has more than doubled. The SourceCoin project is also developing steadily, and this affects the psychological climate of the company. But Lucas just can't get along with the brilliant programmer Eddie. He approaches him once again to express his joy at the fact that the boy is actively using the playroom. However, Eddie immediately sets strict boundaries and asks not to distract himself during rest, and says that he came at Charlie's call and he does not obey Lucas at all. Eddie's armor is thicker than Lucas thought, but he still wants to follow Charlie's advice and befriend this strange guy. Lucas apologizes for disturbing him and places a folded piece of paper in front of Eddie. Mistaking it for a check and Lucas's gesture for an attempt at bribery, Eddie becomes furious. He complains that Lucas is trying to buy his favor with money and threatens to leave. With contempt, he spits out that talk about saving the world is a lie, and everything again comes down to money. In response to this, Lucas grins widely, not understanding what money has to do with it. There is something much more valuable inside the folded paper, and he invites Eddie to see it for himself. The envelope contains a photo of a very beautiful idol girl. This completely leaves Eddie speechless and breathless. He freezes in place. Jennifer is Eddie's favorite performer, and such a gift makes the guy clutch his heart and fall to his knees, which scares Lucas. Eddie doesn't understand how Lucas managed to get his hands on such an incredibly rare autographed card, but Lucas has a small media company in Seoul that helped him with this. Feeling empowered, Lucas replies that since Eddie likes the performer so much, he can give him tickets to her concert if he can accidentally get them. He leans over to Eddie, offering him his hand so the boy can stand up. And after this proposal, in the eyes of the programmer, Lucas becomes almost a saint. Thus, Eddie's permanent employment was successfully completed. Still, Charlie's advice to use otaku favorites to seduce them turned out to be correct. But before Lucas has time to come to his senses, his phone starts ringing off the hook. Dr. Henry calls to report on the results of his research. Lucas wants to know what the current situation is with the coronavirus. Unfortunately, Dr. Lucas cannot provide any good news. Health services in all countries are under enormous strain, and the number of confirmed cases of the disease is growing uncontrollably. If the rate of infection does not decrease, 70% of the world's population is predicted to become infected. Lucas realizes that this marks the beginning of a pandemic. Because he is lost in thought, Dr. Henry calls his name, getting his attention. Lucas asks Henry to continue his work, and in return he will help increase the capacity of artificial intelligence once he completes the development of the cryptocurrency. After the conversation, Lucas thinks about what will happen to the economy. From the pandemic, that the stock and bond markets will collapse, his assets may become worthless. But for some reason, Lucas is sure that in this situation he can earn much more. But you need to figure out how to make money when the economy is collapsing. For such a case, there is a special financial instrument, a put option. It allows you to earn money when the market price falls. But if someone benefits from the system, someone else will lose everything. Thus, put options can be used to make money even if the economy collapses. Lucas feels bad about making money during a pandemic while people are suffering, but he still calms himself down in time by saying that he is an investor and must think first and foremost about profit. After all, if he didn't have the money he has now, he wouldn't be able to save the world. Meanwhile, in the United States, a senator running for president claims that America will save the world from the coronavirus. News of this is broadcast in Ellie's office, who finally calls Lucas. She is shocked and furious that he wants to invest a huge amount of money in a risky put option and bet on the New York stock market to collapse. Lucas chuckles as his girlfriend, and financial advisor yells at him. Ellie wants to stop him, asks how much time she has to intervene, but it turns out that there is only time left until the end of the week, and she is unlikely to be able to help. This makes the girl even more furious, and she literally screams at Lucas. In her opinion, no normal investor would risk losing $200 billion like that. However, Lucas is so monstrously calm, as if he knows the future in advance. He just laughs at how emotional his girlfriend is and can't do anything about it. After all, he missed Ellie and her voice and therefore listens to her with pleasure. Confused by such a sudden confession, the girl immediately loses her furious mood. He only grumbles that Lucas has become more cruel since taking over as CEO. She understands that her boyfriend is very rich, but she finds it difficult to understand such an investment. But Lucas isn't 100% sure either. He just hopes that the prediction might be correct. He also wishes Ellie good luck in adapting to her new place, so that she doesn't give up and believes more in herself and her potential. Touched by his words, the American woman wants to say something tender in response, but she is interrupted. Her colleague flies into the office and warns that the break is over. Lucas and Ellie quickly say goodbye, much to the man's displeasure. He thinks about what he could do with his unexpected free time. Its employees both relax and work, and the same film crew frolics in the pool. The guys are delighted with such a spacious and comfortable house for employees, especially in the States. The scriptwriter working with them reminds them that they came for the filming. Men realize that they have relaxed too much, enjoying the power of capital. However, they all admit that Lucas's life is too boring to film. People would like to see more shocking details about the life of one of the richest people in the world. So the writer comes up with the idea of conducting an interview and asking the CEO about the investment, because many will be curious about how Lucas raised his capital and where he is investing now. The film crew immediately accepts this idea and begins to think about its implementation. Lucas agrees to take part in the interview and meets with the team, but he is surprised that the subject of their meeting is where he invests. However, he immediately tells us that he recently made one investment, and the tone of his voice inspires a producer chasing a sensation. Lucas says he invested 200 billion won in a put option, which is considered a very risky investment. While everyone is in shock, he reassures the team that his expectations may come true, and almost immediately Lucas receives information about the results of his investment. The producer believes that he hit Lucas where it hurts, since the options are very risky and the chances of making a profit are low. The 200 billion that Lucas invested could be perceived negatively by viewers, as a bet in a game of chance, and therefore he is considering abandoning the filming. But Lucas immediately voices the information he received about the option. His profit was 487%, so he earned just over 1 trillion Korean won. The shock team is speechless, but Charlie enters the room and asks Lucas for his time. The man apologizes and leaves, and the team still doesn't believe what they heard. Charlie delights Lucas with the news that the origin coin is finally ready, and all this is thanks to the excellent team that the men managed to assemble. At this moment, Dr. Henry is in the world of his dreams. In his dream, he hears Paul's loud laughter, and sees another training session that he is leading. All participants in the dream assume a muscular pose, showing off their physical fitness. This sight shocks poor Dr. Henry even in his sleep. Finally, Paul takes notice of him and invites him to practice. At the same moment, the doctor's coat is replaced by a sports uniform. From such a nightmare, Henry opens his eyes in a cold sweat in reality. Lying on the couch, Paul stands above him, laughing and greeting his friend. He actively welcomes Dr. Henry as his guest this time. It turns out that Henry lost consciousness again during the experiment. So Paul took the man to his room and laid him down to rest, sent Henry's clothes to the wash, and changed the man into his own. However, the doctor is only interested in how his experiment went. Unfortunately, Paul has nothing to please his student friend with. Thanks to the use of cloud services, 35% of the work was completed, but further calculations were impossible due to insufficient performance. Paul asks his dejected friend to rest while he can. Henry tries to get out of bed, believing that now is not the time to rest as the virus continues to spread. However, Paul immediately stops him and tells him to remain calm. Despite his great passion, Henry is exhausted and unable to conduct research. If he decides to go, Paul warns him that, as a doctor, he can't help, and this makes Henry obey him and lie back down. Henry remembers that it has been 7 years since Paul pulled him out of a fight with the professor. Paul is surprised at how much time has passed since that fight, but does not condemn his friend's actions. He winks at Augustus, noting that he never liked the professor either. Dr. Henry laughs loudly and heartily at his friend's reaction. Paul decides to find out what caused Henry to choose his path in life. Henry doesn't know how to approach this complex and tragic story, but he explains that it all has to do with the illness his younger sister had. It was an infectious disease that had eaten away at her body long before Henry could help her. Paul commiserates with his friend, who takes out a medallion hanging around his neck. Looking at the photograph in it, Henry remembers what a cheerful and talented girl his sister was, who had never been sick before, and after her death, Henry decided that he would definitely eradicate the disease that took his sister from him. He won't let anyone else get sick and die like her. Paul wonders what the name of the person so dear to his friend was. However, he doesn't have time to answer this question as his employee bursts into Paul's room. A man shouts that there are problems with artificial intelligence. This news shocks Henry and makes him freeze in his tracks. Having ripped out the IV and grabbed the doctor's coat, he and Paul rush into the lab. Here, their attention is drawn to a large screen with various indicators. It shows that the artificial intelligence is working and actively researching the virus. No one understands why computing performance has skyrocketed. But then Henry's phone rings. He picks up the phone, and Lucas on the other end of the line asks if the doctor is in the lab. It turns out that it was thanks to Lucas's company that the lab was finally able to move forward. The SourceCoin project has proven to be a success, which delights the staff. Lucas explains to Henry that he is using blockchain technology so that the bio company can supplement itself with the productivity of other computers connected to the system. About an hour ago, the first mining of the new cryptocurrency began, and the number of miners is growing so quickly that within 24 hours, it is predicted that they will spread to 500,000 computers. Lucas notes that the value of artificial intelligence itself is enormous, and without the doctor's research, everything would be useless. He thanks Henry for his work and wants to work together to crush the coronavirus with capital and technology. Dr. Henry is choking on tears at this point and doesn't know what to say except endless words of gratitude. Lucas promises to call him back and smiles contentedly. He is glad that everything worked out. At this time, Paul comes closer to the crying Henry and asks what name he chose for the artificial intelligence. This name becomes Surin, the name of the doctor's deceased younger sister. In the lab, everyone is extremely excited that a big breakthrough has finally occurred. Back in Lucas's office, everyone is happy that the Origin Coin project has been launched. Lucas throws a party and tries to give a speech of thanks, but the programmers prefer to celebrate with each other rather than their bosses. Lucas wants his employees to enjoy their day to the fullest. Charlie reassures him, telling him not to worry and to let the guys focus on the party. Lucas just hopes that everyone on their team is truly happy with the success. Charlie reminds them that they will now have to pay for the release of the Origin Coin to a huge number of people. And this is huge money. It can amount to more than 200 million per month. That's why he's worried about whether Lucas is ready for such a financial investment. He is surprised when his friend reassures him that such money is nothing to him. But this is what Lucas had in mind when he conceived the project. And what matters to him is that the official development of the vaccine has begun. Now he can spend money usefully. and this makes Lucas happier. Charlie looks at his friend from his student days in silence for a long time. He sighs softly, noting that Lucas has truly matured. But Charlie is still interested to know what the CEO's plans are for the future. The team understands that the project work is not expected to last long, so the guys discuss the options among themselves. They would be upset to end it when they found like-minded people and an understanding boss. So Charlie suggests that Lucas think again about what his plans are for the future. Such a sharp question, asked in front of all the employees initially, leaves the man in a stupor. At this stage, he cannot yet say for sure what he would like to achieve, but now he has a team whose job it is to make his ideas possible. So, gathering his courage, Lucas replies that he wants to create a proper cryptocurrency ecosystem. There are currently a lot of negative images associated with coins, such as speculation and fraud, and he wants to improve their reputation. By guaranteeing a minimum value for the source coin, Lucas wants to ensure that it can be used in various fields and make it valuable like a real virtual currency. Lucas thinks that the idea he said out loud for the first time actually excites him. The team is silent as they listen to him, and Lucas is confused by their lack of response. He immediately begins to think that he said something stupid and that he will not be supported. Even Eddie and the programmer girl he likes are watching him closely. Lucas begins to wind himself up more and breaks out in a nervous sweat. It seems to him that he is a disgrace, a humanities scholar who declared something fantastic and unattainable in front of people much smarter than himself. However, suddenly Lucas finds himself surrounded by the sounds of ever-increasing applause. All the guys from his team look at him with respect and loudly applaud his words. This reaction, the opposite of what he expected, shocks Lucas. Eddie, barely holding back tears, admires the loftiness of their boss's plan. Everyone sees the value of his dream and the fun of working for Lucas's company in the future. The programmers are so moved by their boss's idea that they all unanimously decide to follow him further. Lucas is shocked by such an active and emotional reaction from the guys. Charlie says it's because Lucas's goal touched their hearts. Even he himself is considering quitting his job and taking up following his friend in earnest. Because true heroes follow only their hearts. Lucas is happy that he will be able to continue working alongside his friend. He immediately appoints Charlie as vice president of the company and asks him to take care of him in the future. After this conversation, Lucas formed the organizational structure of the team and founded his own company in San Francisco for permanent operations. So, they seriously invested in maintaining the reputation of the cryptocurrency and even created a special shopping center where you could pay for goods with source coins. The source coin could be used to purchase games and various merchandise associated with them. So Lucas created an environment where coins could be used for different purposes, and the number of miners exceeded 1.5 million within a few months. Thanks to the team's efforts, Lucas's company became the largest company in San Francisco in less than 6 months. The speech about the future of the company, which was recorded by the film crew, was uploaded to a video hosting site and became very popular. The company's growth has attracted the attention of financial market analysts, so one of them chose Lucas's company to implement his plans. Perhaps he thought dealing with Lucas would be easy, so he decides to visit Lucas' company and sets up a meeting, at this time in Lucas' company during a break. The employees discuss whether their company is strange. When many stop their activities, due to coronavirus, she not only earns money but also expands. At the same time, salaries even at the entry level are very high for the States. Plus, there are bonuses, allowances, and gifts. It's so good that the employees can't believe their luck and are worried. However, not everyone supports this paranoia and enjoys comfortable working conditions. The vice president of the company is a leader who places team members in the right places for maximum efficiency, and the president invests in breakthrough businesses and seems to have the gift of foresight, and in addition, he is popular on the internet. When such people are at the head of a company, it can be quite difficult to fail. But their personalities are both amazing and terrifying because they are unique specialists. One of these specialists is making fun of another for his popularity on YouTube and asking for an autograph. He tries to get Lucas to express his emotions, but he strenuously ignores him. When Charlie finally laughs, his friend declares that he is glad he is having fun. Lucas himself is embarrassed by his internet popularity, as he has been seen by people from all over the world, and he is not confident in his speech. However, Charlie believes that there is no need to be embarrassed because the result was good. Thanks to this, many people learned about the existence of the source coin, and Lucas's company was able to announce its own direction of development in the cryptocurrency field. They also have the power to change the perception of even the most distrustful people. Lucas is touched by his speech, but Charlie thinks that he will still have to tease him about his blogging career more than once. Suddenly, Lucas's secretary enters the office and announces the arrival of a visitor. The men are surprised by the upcoming meeting and how nervous the girl is. The man who came was the one who analyzed the success of Lucas's company in the market. He introduces himself as Jim. He thanks Lucas and Charlie for accepting him despite the unexpected visit. Jim says his work is an investment accelerator. Lucas wants to know what investments Jim is dealing with, but he refuses to give out the names of his clients and is generally being somewhat evasive. This makes Lucas wary, since Jim doesn't give any specifics. If the company Jim works for were doing well, he would gladly reveal its name, but he keeps it a secret. Lucas immediately decides that it is not worth getting involved with Jim and decides to leave because he is not going to trust his investments to anyone else. However, Jim immediately begins to tempt Lucas with sums of tens of billions of dollars, which Lucas could lose if he declines his offer. After some tension, Lucas decides to listen to what the guest wants from him. He acts very confidently, as if Lucas really needs his services. He begins to explain the increasing value of cryptocurrency, since the amount of capital moved using coins cannot be estimated. However, it is even better to have full access to this capital because it will help bring fabulous profits to those who take the risk. Taking up the conversation, Lucas asks if the man is sure this is possible, and he explains that all that is needed is to increase the price of the source coin. Since the public trust in the original coins is so high, he wants to use this and issue 10 billion of these coins, then use the press and connections to drive up prices and sell them on the stock exchange, easily making hundreds of billions of dollars. This scheme infuriates Charlie and Lucas because it seems so familiar. It only takes one look at each other for Lucas and Charlie to realize that they are thinking the same thing. They realize that Jim was the criminal who was illegally controlling the flow of cryptocurrency and rigging its rise and fall. In the eyes of the men, Jim looks like a villain who has now decided to lay his hands on their business. Charlie immediately stands up in irritation, not wanting to waste his time talking to the villain, but Lucas remains in place and remains silent, not showing such an aggressive reaction. It looks like he is deep in thought, doubting, and wants to accept Jim's offer. He really thinks that his new acquaintance could be useful, and if his scheme is implemented, Lucas will never need money again, no matter how much he spends. However, he also understands what his agreement will lead to in relation to ordinary people. A slight smile touches his lips, becoming more insidious and cruel. Charlie is horrified that Lucas finds this inappropriate proposal interesting.